In my previous life, I refused to let Wen Xubai take a concubine. He hated me for the rest of his life. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day his family was supposed to formally propose marriage. This time he had deliberately delayed, coming with the betrothal gifts, and I had no intention of waiting for the Wen family any longer. They were already a full 4 hours late when I woke. Half the red candles in the front hall had burned away. Longans, lotus seeds, and peanuts were arranged on the table, and the white porcelain pot of celebratory tea had already been refilled with hot water twice. The matchmaker sat in her chair, the smile on her face long since stiffened. My father paced back and forth with his hands clasped behind his back. "Send someone else to the south of the city to look," he ordered. The steward had barely begun to answer when a young servant from the Wen family hurried over the threshold. There was no sweat on his forehead and no mud on the soles of his shoes, yet the first thing he did after entering was pant several times, as if he had run himself ragged all the way here. "Master Chen, we are terribly sorry. Our young master happened to meet Miss Su on the road. She had suffered an injustice and he cannot get away at the moment. Please ask the Chen family to wait a little longer." The words, "Miss Su," struck my ears. Sensation suddenly returned to my icy fingers. The smell of medicine beside my sickbed, Wen Xubai's indifferent eyes, and the sentence that had weighed on half my life all crashed into my mind at once. If you hadn't been unable to tolerate Wenlin, my life would never have been so stifling. In my previous life, I had waited in this same hall until dusk. When Wen Xubai finally arrived, rainwater clung to the front of his robe. He apologized to my father, then held my hand and explained that Su Wenlin had been humiliated at the girls' school, and that he could not stand by and do nothing. I had been afraid that breaking off the engagement would damage the relationship between our two families. I had been even more afraid that others would call me jealous and intolerant, so I swallowed my grievance and still exchanged betrothal cards with him. Only much later did I learn that nothing life-threatening had happened that day. Su Wenlan had merely argued with a student's parent at the girls' school. Wen Xubai had stayed with her because he wanted to use his lateness to tell me that even after we married, she would always occupy a place in his life. I had not understood it then. I had believed that if I took good care of the Wen family, treated his mother as my own, and saw each of his siblings through their schooling and marriages, he would eventually understand who was truly going to spend a lifetime with him. Instead, I waited my whole life. I waited for him to come back to our room. I waited for him to speak to me. I waited for him to acknowledge how much I had done. I waited for him to look at me once when I lay dying. He never did. My father's voice dragged me back from that cold bedroom of another lifetime. "Why do you look so pale? Are you tired from waiting? Go back to your room and rest. When the Wen family arrives, I'll have someone call you." I stood. The blanket over my knees slid to the floor. Everyone in the hall looked at me. I walked to the table, untied the red silk fastened around the teapot, and said, "Clear all of this away." My father froze. "Clear what away?" "The celebratory tea, the red candles, the fruit, everything." The matchmaker shot to her feet. "Miss Chen, this is no time for a tantrum. Young Master Wen is only a little late. A man always has business to attend to outside the home." I looked at the Wen servant. "Did your young master say when he would arrive?" The servant's eyes darted aside. "Miss Su's matter has not yet been settled. Then he needn't come." The hall fell abruptly silent. My father crossed the room in a few strides and lowered his voice. "Lingyi, don't be willful. Once the two families exchange the betrothal cards today, the marriage will be settled. The Wen family may not be wealthy, but Xubai is a famous young scholar in the city. His prospects will not be poor." Everyone had said the same thing in my previous life. Xubai was refined, talented, upright, a rare good husband. As for the leaking roof of the Wen residence, his chronically ill mother, his two unmarried younger siblings, and the family shops that barely made a profit, those were merely temporary hardships. And my dowry, the weaving house my mother had left me, and the Chen family's connections just happened to be enough to carry them through. Father. He knows exactly what day this is. Yet he made the Chen family wait because of another woman. I set the red silk down on the table. If Su Wenlin were the woman he was proposing to today, would he still have been late? My father opened his mouth but did not answer. I turned to the matchmaker. "Please write a statement for both families." The Wen family failed to come as agreed to make the formal proposal. The Chen family will not continue the marriage arrangement. Today's matter has nothing to do with you. Your fee will be paid in full. The matchmaker's gaze flicked uncertainly between my father and me. She did not dare put brush to paper, so I walked to the writing table myself, spread out a sheet of paper, and picked up the brush. In my previous life, after marrying into the Wen family, I had handled endless social obligations for Wen Xubai, and read more contracts and account books than I could remember. This time, I needed no one to write for me. The moment the ink touched the paper, my wrist was remarkably steady. I wrote that Chen Lingyi and Wen Xubai's marriage agreement was dissolved, stamped it with my personal seal, and handed the paper to the Wen servant. "Take it back." His face went pale. "Miss Chen, our young master is only a little late. If you make such a scene, he may become angry." I looked at him. Whether he is angry has nothing to do with me. My father slammed his palm onto the table. The tea service rattled and water splashed across the tabletop. "Chenling, do you know what breaking an engagement means for a woman? The entire city will call you spoiled and jealous. What respectable family will be willing to marry you after this?" Something seemed to scrape lightly across my chest in my previous life. Those were exactly the words I feared most. I feared people saying I would never marry. I feared gossip that the Chen family's daughter did not know how to behave. I feared disappointing my father. I feared Wen Xubai being unhappy. I had feared so many the possibility that I myself might live badly. "Then I won't marry." My voice was not loud, yet my father went completely still. I turned to the long table where my dowry list lay. The bright red booklet was already more than half filled. A residence in the east of the city, paddy fields south of the city, 3 shops, and Hanzhong weaving house which my mother had left me. In my previous life, all of it had entered the Wen household with me. The residence was used for Wen Xubai's younger's marriage. The income from the fields financed his friendships with fellow scholars. The shops paid his mother's medical bills. Hanzhong weaving house covered the Wen family's shortfalls year after year. Eventually, the women workers left one after another because their wages were overdue. Any shelter which my mother had left me was shut down after Madame Wen claimed that sheltering women cast out by their husbands would damage the family's reputation. I found the 4 characters for Hanzhong weaving house on the dowry list and crossed them out. My father seized the booklet. "What are you doing? The weaving house will not be part of my dowry. You've broken off the engagement, and now you still intend to keep the family's property in your own hands?" Mother left it to me. His grip slowly tightened. I did not yield. Just then, hurried footsteps sounded outside the courtyard. Wen Xubai had finally arrived. He wore a moon-white long robe, his features as cool and handsome as ever, with only a faint crease between his brows from the journey. When he saw that the red silk had been removed and the refreshments had gone cold, he stopped short. "What happened?" The Wen servant hurried over and handed him the written cancellation of the engagement. Wen Xubai glanced down. His expression changed. He raised his eyes to me. "Lingyi, I was only delayed for half a day. Why must you make such a scene?" That familiar tone again, as if every fault in the matter came down to my failure to be sensible enough. I looked at the man I had once loved, resented, and waited for all my life. Suddenly I realized he was not nearly as unattainable as I remembered. He was simply a man who deliberately arrived late on an important day for another woman, then confidently assumed I would forgive him. For the first time I did not call him Xubai. "Wen Xubai, this match is off." His brow tightened. He lowered his voice. "Wenlin was bullied at the girls' school. I couldn't ignore it. You've always been reasonable. Why throw a tantrum over such a small matter?" I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, what I'm ending is the engagement, not a tantrum." With that I pulled the dowry booklet out from under my father's hand and walked out of the front hall. Spring wind swept through the courtyard, scattering red paper decorations that had not yet been put away. At the courtyard gate, our old steward hurried toward me, holding a copper key darkened with age. "Miss, shopkeeper Song from Hanzhong weaving house has come. He says the weaving house owes 2 months of wages, and the women staying in the rear courtyard are nearly out of food." I took the key, its teeth pressed painfully into my palm. In my previous life, I had taken everything into the Wen family and ultimately preserved nothing. This time, I would not wait for Wen Xubai, nor would I use what my mother left me to fill someone else's life. Wen Xubai's voice suddenly came from behind me. "Chen Lingyi, if you walk out this door today, don't regret it later." I did not turn around. "Young Master Wen, you should save those words for yourself." I thought I had made myself clear enough. Unexpectedly, he followed me into the inner courtyard. He reached for my sleeve. I stepped aside, his hand stopped in midair, and a flash of astonishment crossed his face. In my previous life, I had never avoided him like that. Even when he stayed away from our room for days after we married, even when he gave me the cold shoulder because of Su Wenlin, I would still personally prepare his clothes, make soup, and wait until he was willing to speak. He had probably believed I would never truly leave him, no matter what. "I know you were wrong today." He withdrew his hand and softened his tone. But Wenlin is alone at Yunzhou girls' school, and people deliberately make trouble for her. If I don't stay, no one will speak for her. So what happened today wasn't because I meant to slight the Chen family. Did you send someone in advance to tell us you would be delayed? He paused. It happened suddenly. When you sent the servant with a message, did you give a definite time? He did not answer. I looked at him. You said nothing. You simply expected the Chen family and me to keep waiting. You decided how long we waited, and you decided whether the marriage continued. Lingji, I only hoped you would understand him again. In my previous life, he needed to take care of Su Wenlin, support impoverished scholar friends, and arrange futures for his younger siblings. Every time he needed my understanding. Yet he never understood why my dowry shrank day by day, why I was still checking accounts late at night, or why I finally lost control when I heard he intended to bring Su Wenlan into the Wen residence. If the woman receiving your proposal today were Su Wenlin, I asked, would you have been late for her because of me? A crack finally appeared in his expression. Why must you compare yourself with Wenlin? I'm not comparing myself with her. I met his eyes. I'm looking to see whether you're willing to take responsibility for your own engagement. His face darkened. You've become unreasonable. That sentence was almost identical to what he had said in my previous life. Back then, he had stood before me holding the document to take Su Wenlin as his concubine and said that she had lived at the girls' school for years, that her reputation had suffered, and that he could not watch her remain alone for the rest of her life. When I asked what that made me, he said I was unreasonable now. The words no longer hurt as much. If that's what you believe, then you have even less reason to marry me. I turned away behind me. Wen Xubai called, you're only angry. Once you've calmed down for a few days, I'll come again. I stopped but did not turn. Young Master Wen, don't come again. I'm ending an engagement, not throwing a tantrum. Back in my room, the first thing I did was tell my maid, Qingdai, to gather everything connected to the Wen family. The half-embroidered sachet, the jade bracelet Madame Wen had sent, and the inkstone Wen Xubai had asked someone to deliver the year before. Everything went into a wooden box. Qingdai's eyes reddened. Miss, do all of these truly have to be returned? You used to love that jade inkstone most. I glanced down at it. Wen Xubai had given me that inkstone when he was 18. In my previous life I had kept it beside me after marrying him. I used it while copying countless essays for him. Later, when I was too ill to hold a brush, the inkstone fell to the floor and broke in two. He did not come to look even once. The object did nothing wrong, I said, closing the box. It simply has no reason to remain with me now. That afternoon, my father summoned me to his study. The engagement cancellation document and dowry booklet lay on the table. You truly don't intend to turn back? I don't. Wen Xubai was wrong to be late today, but a man being loyal and compassionate is not a bad thing. He's lost both parents. It is understandable that he would take a little more care of her. I sat opposite him. Father, how much care do you think counts as reasonable? My father frowned. You're fixating on this. He can be late with the proposal because of her. After marriage, if she falls ill, should he stay with her through the night? If she has nowhere to go, should he bring her into the Wen residence? If she refuses to marry anyone else, should he also take responsibility for the rest of her life? My father was silent for a moment. Those are things that may happen later. I tightened my fingers around the copper key hidden in my sleeve. There are some things I no longer want to wait until later to understand. Of course my father could not understand. He thought today's humiliation had simply made me lose perspective. You say you want to take over Hanjiang Weaving House, he said. That workshop has lost money year after year, and any shelter behind it houses a group of women with no family to rely on. You're an unmarried young woman. If you spend every day mixed up with them, your reputation will only worsen. When mother left me the weaving house, she never said it could only be handed to a married daughter. His expression stiffened. After my mother died, Uncle Song had managed Hanjiang Weaving House for me. Whenever the Chen family's other shops had trouble with cash flow, my father drew money from the weaving house. At first, it was only a temporary loan. Later, it happened more and more often, and the accounts became increasingly tangled. Before marrying into the Wen family in my previous life, I had never seriously examined any of it. Father, let's make an agreement. I took a blank sheet of paper from my sleeve. For 1 year I will manage Hanjiang Weaving House without using any other Chen family money. If it is still losing money at the end of the year, you may decide what happens to it. He stared at me. And if it makes a profit, then from that point on, mother's property and my marriage will both be mine to decide. You want to go a full year without discussing marriage. Chen Lingji, you're already 19. All the more reason not to marry carelessly. His chest rose and fell several times. He seemed ready to scold me, but when he saw how calm I was, he finally picked up the brush. Fine. For this year, the Chen family will not cover a single copper coin for you. If the weaving house incurs debts, you will bear them yourself. Agreed. When he stamped the document, the copper key had already pressed a deep mark into my palm. This time, no one would cover my losses. Oddly, I was not afraid. That evening dive to Hanzhong Weaving House in the western part of the city. Its storefront was small, and most of the gold paint on the wooden sign had flaked away. When I pushed open the door, the clatter of the looms was sparse and uneven. More than a dozen women stopped working and looked at me at once. There was no welcome in their eyes, only caution. Uncle Song came out to meet me. Most of his hair had already gone white. "Miss, why have you come yourself?" "I'm taking over the weaving house." His face changed. "The affairs here are complicated. You've only just broken off your engagement. Perhaps you should rest at home for a while first. Why are the wages 2 months overdue?" His words died in his throat. I placed the account books on the table. "How many people are in any shelter behind the workshops?" 7. 2 are old and unable to do heavy work. 3 have children with them. 2 arrived only recently. "How many days of grain are left?" Uncle Song lowered his voice. 3 days. The atmosphere in the courtyard grew heavier. A young worker finally spoke up. "Miss, if you've come to close the workshop, then first pay the wages you owe us. We work for Hanzhong Weaving House. We don't owe the Qin family anything." Her words were blunt, but I did not blame her. "The wages will be paid. I cannot pay all of them today. Give me 30 days first. I will pay 1 month's wages. The remainder will be made up in 2 installments. Beginning tomorrow, the workshop will stop filling any credit order without a repayment deadline. Every batch of cloth, every amount of thread used, every work hour, and every loss will be recorded again." Uncle Song hesitated. "Many are old customers with years of history. If we suddenly stop extending credit, we may offend them. The workers have gone 2 months without pay. Are we still going to rely on them to maintain those old customer relationships for us?" His face reddened. At that moment, a man's voice sounded from outside. "Miss Chin, if you cannot even pay the rent on the water wheel, re-recording the accounts will not solve much." I turned. A man in a dark teal long robe stood at the doorway holding a rolled lease. He was tall and lean, his features calm. His gaze went first to the looms, then to the disorderly piles of dyed thread and wooden tubs. Uncle Song quietly explained, "This is Headmaster Gu Shun of the Gu clan school. The water wheel and dyeing ponds used by the weaving house belong to the Gu family." Gu Shun set the lease on the table. "Last quarter's rent is 27 days overdue." The Gu family had already decided to take back the water wheel. I opened the lease. The rent was not especially high, but Hanzhong Weaving House truly could not pay it at present. "Could you grant us some time?" "Yes," he answered so quickly that I was taken aback. 30 days. If the rent is fully paid by then, the lease continues as before. "And if it isn't?" Gushun looked toward any shelter behind the workshop. "If, after 30 days, the weaving house is still being kept alive by overdue wages, unpaid rent, and Miss Chen's personal assets, the Gu family will take the water wheel back." My brow tightened. Headmaster Gu seems strongly opposed to any shelter. "I do not oppose giving people with nowhere else to go a place to stay," he said evenly. "I oppose making another group of poor people pay for your charitable reputation." The courtyard went silent. The words were not pleasant, but they pierced the confidence I had just begun to feel in my previous life. I had grown accustomed to solving every problem with my own dowry. If the Wen family lacked money, I made it up. If Madame Wen fell ill, I paid for the medicine. If Wen Xubai's younger siblings needed marriages arranged, I handled it. Eventually, everyone forgot that the money and energy had originally belonged to me. Now with Hanzhong Weaving House barely in my hands, my first instinct had been to sell my jewelry and hold everything up myself again. But what happened when one day I could no longer hold it up? Any shelter would still close. The workers would still go unpaid. I closed the lease. "All right, give me 30 days. Jusen studied me for a moment, then wrote a temporary extension into the agreement. I stamped it as well. As he rolled the document back up, his gaze passed over the engagement cancellation paper lying on the table. "Miss Ken seems to have had a busy day. If Headmaster Gu intends to discuss my marriage, you can save your time. I do not discuss other people's marriages." He turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. 30 days from now, I will look only at the accounts." The setting sun poured in from behind him and stretched his shadow across the floor. Holding the key my mother had left me, I understood for the first time that this year was not about proving to my father that I could survive after impulsively breaking an engagement. I wanted to prove something else. Even without relying on marriage, and without relying on anyone's pity, Hanzhong Weaving House and I could stand up again. And the 30-day countdown Guzin had given me had already begun. The workshop's accounts were even worse than I expected. Before dawn the next morning, I arrived at Hanzhong. Uncle Song brought out nearly 3 years of account books, enough to cover half a table. Some entries were written clearly, some were scrawled in charcoal on scraps of paper. Several large expenditures had only one note beside them, transferred to other Qin family shops for temporary cash flow. I turned the pages one by one. Over the previous 2 years, Hanzhong Weaving House had lent a total of more tom-tom taels of silver to other Chen family businesses. Less than 30% had been repaid. At the same time, 17 long-standing customers in the city had accumulated unpaid credit accounts. The oldest debt had been outstanding for a year and a half. Hanzhong was not without income, it simply never kept the money it earned. Why have none of these old debts been pressed, I asked. Uncle Song sighed. They were all old relationships from the days when your mother managed the place. Some families had funerals, some shops had trouble with their cash flow. Your mother used to say that if we could help, we should. My mother had been soft-hearted. I remembered her saying that business could not care only about silver, but she would never have let the women who worked for her go 2 months without wages. Starting today, no new goods are delivered on credit. Every old debt will be pursued one by one. Anyone who genuinely has difficulty may pay in installments, but a date must be written down. Uncle Song looked troubled. If we do that, we may lose many customers. If customers do not pay, in what sense are they giving the weaving house business? He had no answer. I then ordered a full inventory of the warehouse. High-priced silk cloth made up most of our stock. Yunzhou had many prosperous households, but only a handful were willing to buy expensive silk on a regular basis. Hanzhong had continued producing at the same scale as when my mother was alive. The designs had not changed, and the prices were higher than those of the larger workshops in the south of the city. Why don't we make ordinary, fine cloth? A senior weaver, Aunt Liu, hesitated before answering. When your mother was alive, Hanzhong was famous for silk. If we switch to common cloth, people will say we've fallen in status. The workers cannot even receive their wages. What status are we protecting? I had Qingdai bring in a wooden box. It held jewelry I had sorted the night before. Take 2 gold hairpins to the pawn shop. Use the money to pay another portion of the wages. The women did not cheer, they only stared at the box with complicated expressions. The young worker who had spoken bluntly the previous day was named Chuntao. She frowned. Miss, how many times can you pawn jewelry? This time it's hairpins. Next time, bracelets. What happens when everything has been pawned? Uncle Song scolded her. Chuntao, how can you speak to Miss like that? She's right, I said. Chuntao looked startled that I agreed with her. I had originally also planned to sell the inkstone Wen Xubai had given me. It was not worth much, but it would have kept any shelter supplied for a few more days. Now I understood that Gushun had not been deliberately making things difficult for me. If a place could survive only because I kept throwing my possessions into it, how is it different from the Wen family of my previous life? I walked into the courtyard and had every worker stop her loom. Starting today, wages will be divided into 3 parts. Everyone who works here receives a basic food allowance. Piecework pay will be based on how much cloth is completed. Anyone skilled enough and willing to train newcomers receives an additional teaching bonus. Someone immediately asked, what about people who work slowly? Older women can trim threads and prepare warps. Those whose eyesight is poor can boil paste, clean, or help with work in any shelter. Women with children can take turns watching the children. Everyone else works according to what she can do. And if someone falls ill, each month, once the weaving house has profit, 10% will be set aside as sick leave money. The courtyard remained quiet for a long time. Aunt Liu was the first to speak. Miss, won't that be terribly complicated to calculate? Complicated is better than muddled. I had Qingdai write every new rule down then. I asked each worker to tell me what she was good at and what she was not. One woman wove slowly and did not know how to dye. Another had extraordinarily sharp eyes and could detect uneven thread tension at a glance. A woman nearly 60 years old moved slowly but was best at calming children. Before, they had all simply been called women workers, receiving the same grain allowance while doing different tasks. Resentment was inevitable. By noon, we had barely managed to divide everyone into 4 work groups. I was still calculating wages when Gu Shun entered the courtyard. Today, he was not wearing the dark teal long robe from the day before. He wore simple gray cloth, his sleeves rolled up with wood shavings from the water wheel still clinging to his hands. Headmaster Gu repairs the water wheel himself. I'm inspecting its wear. His gaze passed over the new work placards hanging in the courtyard. Miss Chin moves quickly. If you're here to collect the rent, you'll have to wait a few more days. I'm here to remind you that the water wheel can run at most 16 hours a day. If you keep it running without pause to catch up on work, it will break before the 30 days are over. I added a line for repair expenses to the ledger. About how much? Guzin gave me a figure. I frowned. That much? The axle should have been replaced last year. Hanzhong kept putting it off. Uncle Song coughed awkwardly beside us. I did not pursue the matter. There were too many old debts. Blaming one person could not solve them now. Guzin noticed the wooden jewelry box on the table. Miss Chin intends to cover wages by selling jewelry? Temporarily. How long is temporary? His tone still was not pleasant. I looked up. Headmaster Gu seems to enjoy pressing people about their difficulties, because if hardship is not written into the accounts, it turns into a favor, and if no one repays that favor, the cost eventually falls on the weakest person. A breeze passed through the courtyard, making the hanging skeins of thread sway. I did not argue. Does Headmaster Gu have a better idea? Stop producing expensive silk for now. Uncle Song's face changed, but that is Hanzhong's signature product. Guzin did not look at him. He looked only at me. A reputation won't feed anyone and it won't pay wages. The Gu clan's tenant households buy fine cloth every spring and autumn. Inns and restaurants also need washable tablecloths and curtains. The profit is lower, but payment is faster. Will the Gu family place an order with me? No, his answer was immediate. At least not now. The Gu family will not risk clan property to help you test a business idea. I actually laughed. Then Headmaster Gu came all this way merely to tell me a path anyone could think of. I came to remind you not to stare only at what this workshop was good at in the past. He walked over to the water wheel and checked the wooden axle again. Watching his back, I suddenly thought of Wen Xubai. Wen Xubai had always said he understood my difficulties, but he never told me the truth about them. Guzin's words were sharp. He refused to give me even a little special treatment. But every problem he pointed out was real. I pulled my gaze away and pushed the jewelry box back toward Qingdai. Don't pawn the hairpins yet, Qingdai stared. Then what about the wages? We collect the old debts. That afternoon I personally took Chuntao and 2 workers to the 3 households whose debts were oldest. At the first shop we visited, they claimed the shopkeeper was away. I sat there and waited for a full 4 hours. The second pleaded poverty. I had them sign an installment agreement and pay 20% immediately. The third became openly hostile, saying that when my mother was alive she had never pressed people so ruthlessly. I did not argue. I simply had my workers carry back the goods that had not yet been delivered. Before nightfall we recovered Mochambamibe taels of silver. It was not much, but it was enough to pay half a month's wages. When the women received the money, Chunto held her string of copper coins and stared at it for a long time. Miss, you really collected it back. Your wages were inside those old debts to begin with. I did not think I had done anything remarkable. I had merely taken back what already belonged to them. On the 3rd day, the Wen family sent someone to cancel the silk order they had planned to use for the wedding. The messenger was one of Madame Wen's older servants. She stood at the entrance to the workshop and deliberately raised her voice so everyone could hear. Our young master has made other arrangements. Since Miss Chen has no intention of entering the Wen family, naturally the Wen family has no reason to continue supporting her business. The women in the courtyard stopped working. If completed, that order would have brought us nearly 200 taels in revenue. Uncle Song anxiously stepped forward. I raised a hand to stop him. Was there a deposit? The servant stiffened. No. Was there a written contract? No. The 2 families were going to marry. Why would we need a contract? Then if the Wen family cancels it, it is cancelled. She had not expected me to answer so readily. Miss Chen, think carefully. Old Madame Wen said that if you personally go to the Wen residence and apologize, the order may continue as before. Please tell old Madame Wen that the production time they have freed has already been assigned elsewhere. The servant sneered. Everyone in the city knows Hanzhong Weaving House is about to close. Other than the Wen family, who will buy your cloth? She turned and left. Uncle Song immediately asked, Miss, what other arrangement do we have? None yet. Everyone's expression sank. I went to the storeroom and touched the piles of fine thread. Starting today, stop the wedding silk. Switch to ordinary fine cloth. Aunt Liu could not help saying, but there is almost no profit in a bolt of common cloth. First make something people can afford to buy. Then we can talk about how much profit we want. We adjusted the looms again. On the 5th day, the first batch of fine cloth came off the looms. Its colors were not particularly striking, but it felt sturdy in the hand. I had Chunto take it to a nearby market and test a price 10% lower than the big workshops in the south of the city. That day, she sold only 3 bolts. On the 6th day, 7. On the 7th, and In ordered 20 bolts to make bed curtains and paid the full amount in advance. On the 10th day, we finally paid the remaining half-month of overdue wages. There were 20 days left on the temporary water wheel agreement. I was calculating rent with Uncle Song when the Gushun carrying a new contract. The Gu clan needs 300 bolts of plain cloth. Uncle Song's eyes lit up. I did not immediately celebrate. When is delivery? 10 days. I looked up. Headmaster Gu knows our looms are old. 300 bolts in 10 days is impossible, which is why I'm asking first whether you want the order. Why give it to Hanzhong? The workshop the Gu clan normally uses raised its price at the last moment. He did not say he was trying to help me. That made me more comfortable. I opened the contract, 300 bolts, uniform specifications, for each day late. 10% of the unpaid portion would be deducted. The risk was enormous. If we succeeded, the water wheel rent, the outstanding dye bill, and next month's wages would all be covered. If we failed, Hanjing would lose what little credibility it had regained. Chuntao stood nearby, nervously twisting the edge of her sleeve. I looked at the looms in the courtyard, and then at the workers we had reorganized into groups. I accepted the brush. Goose offered me. Didn't Headmaster Gu say he would look only at the accounts? I wrote my name on the contract. In 10 days, the accounts will give you an answer. Once word spread that we had to deliver 300 bolts in 10 days, no one in the workshop could laugh. Uncle Song recalculated our existing looms, workers, and thread 3 times, then shook his head. Miss, even if no one sleeps, we can make at most 220 bolts. How many unused looms are nearby? There are more than 10 in Widow Alley in the west of the city, but they are old and in disrepair. A few households also have women who know how to weave, but do not work in workshops. I immediately had Qingdai bring brush and paper, ask whether they are willing to take 10 days of temporary work. Their looms can be moved here, or Hanzhong can deliver thread to their homes. We inspect every bolt and pay by accepted output. Uncle Song hesitated. Temporary workers vary greatly in skill. If the cloth is ruined, then they must first make a sample. I divided the order into 4 stages: spinning, weaving, inspection, and finishing. Each stage had a designated person responsible for it. Every temporary worker first had to weave a sample about 1/3 of a meter long. Only after it passed inspection could she receive thread. If the thread supplied by Hanzhong was defective, the workshop bore the loss. If cloth was damaged by an individual's mistake, a portion of her piecework pay could be deducted, but never more than half her pay for that day. When I finished reading out the rules, Chunta said, "Miss, won't everyone think there are too many rules? Better to find the rules troublesome now than blame one another after something goes wrong." That afternoon, the first temporary workers arrived. One was a widow surnamed Zhou, who brought her 12-year-old daughter. She could weave and her daughter could spin, but she worried people would laugh at them for showing themselves in public. I did not urge her to be brave, nor promise that Hansos would protect her for the rest of her life. I simply showed her the wages written on paper. They will be settled in 10 days. If your sample does not pass, you may leave today. If it passes, you may start today. She studied the numbers for a long time, then pressed her fingerprint onto the agreement. By the 3rd day, 21 temporary workers had joined us. The clatter of luzum sounded from dawn until night. I changed the scattered individual meals into one shared meal service and arranged rotating rest periods, so no one would ruin her health just to earn a few more copper coins. When Gushun came to inspect the first sample batch, he happened to find me arguing with Uncle Song about the contract. "The penalty for late delivery is too high," I said, pointing at the page. "If the Gu clan changes the specifications halfway through, we have to stop and start over. That loss cannot be ours alone." Gushun opened the contract. "The specifications are already written. What if the Gu clan suddenly asks us to add the clan school emblem? It won't. A verbal won't does not count." He looked at me. The looms clattered steadily in the courtyard while fine rain fell outside the window. After a moment he handed me the brush. "What do you want to add?" After the late delivery clause, I wrote that if the Gu clan changed the quantity, color, dimensions, or markings after production began, it would compensate Hanzhong 20% of the unfinished goods as stoppage loss, and the delivery date would be extended accordingly. Gushun read it but did not stamp it immediately. "Miss Chen, do you always write the worst possible outcome down before cooperating with someone?" My fingers paused. Before our marriage in my previous life, Wen Xubai had promised me many things. He said Su Wenlin was only a friend. He said the Wen family would never use my dowry. He said if we ever had a disagreement, he would discuss it with me. Not one promise had been written down. Later, whenever he broke one, he merely said I was being too calculating. "When things are written clearly," I said, setting down the brush. There is no need to spend the rest of one's life guessing. Gushun looked at me for a moment, then took the brush and signed and stamped the amended clause. All right. The answer was quiet, yet somehow the cold contract on the table felt more reliable than every gentle promise of my previous life. On the 6th day, the 100th bolt was finished. Gushun personally brought people to inspect it. He examined the cloth rigorously. Every bolt had its width measured and its warp and weft checked under tension. Chuntao stood nearby with sweaty palms, terrified he would find faults. In the end, 97 bolts passed. 3 were rejected because the edges were loose and had to be redone. Gushun did not relax the standard in the slightest merely because he knew me. Instead, I felt relieved. At least his standards did not change with his mood. After the inspection, he did not leave at once. He walked to the water wheel. The axle sounds wrong, Uncle Song said. We've been using it so heavily these days. A little noise is unavoidable. Gushun crouched to inspect it. I followed. When the wheel turned, the wooden axle made a faint rubbing sound that was almost impossible to notice unless one listened carefully. How long can it last? I asked. If you keep it under 16 hours a day, perhaps half a month. At your current pace, 5 days at most. There were 4 days left until delivery. Repairing the axle would mean stopping production for at least half a day. Stop the water wheel at dawn tomorrow, I decided immediately. Everyone can use the time to finish and sort the cloth already woven. Uncle Song was alarmed. We will lose more than 10 bolts in half a day. If the axle breaks, we will weave none at all. Gushun glanced at me. Mischun is more cautious than when we first met. Headmaster Gu is easier to speak with than when we first met. Chunto burst out laughing before she could stop herself. Gushun's expression did not change. He merely wrote down the wood needed for the repair and handed the list to Uncle Song. That evening when I returned to the Chen residence, the gatekeeper told me Wen Xubai had come. He stood in the side hall holding a book. When I entered, his eyes traveled over my clothes. I had spent the entire day at the weaving house. Dust stained the hem of my skirt, and my sleeves were still rolled up. I looked nothing like the carefully dressed young lady I had once been. You've been at the weaving house every day? Yes. You're an unmarried young woman mixing with female laborers and temporary workers. And you've been dealing frequently with Gushun. People outside are already talking. I sat and poured tea. Young Master Wen came specially to remind me. I'm saying this for your own good. In what capacity? His expression stiffened. We've known each other for many years. Then you should know even better that I dislike people interfering in my affairs without being invited. His brow drew tight. Lingji, are you truly going to ruin your reputation merely to prove a point? I raised the teacup. Qingdai, see our guest out. Wen Xubai did not move. Su Wenlin has accepted my proposal. I looked up. He seemed to be waiting for something. For surprise, for jealousy, for regret. At that moment, I only felt tired. The thing I had spent half a lifetime trying to stop in my previous life had finally happened smoothly in this one. Congratulations. His fingers tightened around the book. You have nothing else to say. Once the wedding date is set, remember to send an invitation. I'll return the courtesy gift according to the usual custom between old acquaintances. Wen Xubai's expression darkened completely. Chen Lingji, are you so close to Gushun now, because he can help you more than I can? Headmaster Gu has not helped me. I set down my cup. He does business with me. He gave you an order for 300 bolts. Are you saying he has no ulterior motive? The contract states the price, the deadline, and the penalties. If he has an ulterior motive, he should have written that in too. Wen Xubai had no answer. I looked toward the door. Young Master Wen, please. He finally left. As he passed me, he lowered his voice. One day you will understand that a woman's reputation matters more than business. I did not respond. At dawn the next morning the water wheel stopped. Gushun brought a carpenter to replace the axle. Everyone at Hanzhong switched to trimming loose threads, sorting finished cloth and trimming edges. The water wheel began turning again. On the 8th day, we had completed Haichum Bami bolts, on the 9th Haichum Beisasao. 3 days before final delivery, a cry from Chuntao suddenly rang out from the storeroom. Miss! I hurried over and saw her holding a bolt that had just come off the loom. At first glance the surface looked even. When I ran my hand over it carefully, I could feel that the weft tension was inconsistent. Uncle Song opened several nearby bolts. The same problem, it was not one bolt, more than 40 were defective. If all of them had to be rewoven, there was no possibility of finishing within 10 days. The clatter of the looms gradually died away. Everyone looked at me. Uncle Song's lips had gone pale. Miss, perhaps we could mix them into the good cloth and send them together. I rubbed the uneven weave between my fingers. The late delivery penalty written into the contract looked as sharp as a knife in my mind. But worse than losing money would be trying to pass defective goods off as acceptable. Once we did that, Hanzhong would lose its credibility forever. I raised my head. No mixing. Send the qualified cloth first. We'll find another use for the defective pieces ourselves. 43 bolts were unqualified. The problem came from 3 old looms. During the previous days, wear in the water wheel axle had made the tension feeding into those looms unstable. Sometimes the weft was too loose, sometimes too tight. From a distance, the defect was barely visible, but clothing made from the fabric would distort after being washed a few times. Uncle Song stood in the storeroom, looking miserable. The Gu clan is making spring clothes for tenant households and the clan school, not fine silk garments. If no one looks too carefully, they may never notice. They may not notice today. They'll notice when the clothes warp after washing. But if we're late, this order will barely earn us anything. Better to earn nothing than deceive someone. I had all the cloth inspected again. In the end, Haichum Numatam bolts were qualified. We were short 42 under the contract. The Gu clan could deduct payment for every day those 42 bolts were late. I took Uncle Song and delivered the accepted cloth in person. Gu Shun inspected it in the Gu clan storeroom as usual. He checked every bolt without losing his temper, merely because the quantity was short. When he finished, he closed the inspection ledger. 42 bolts are missing. You've identified the cause. When can you make them up? 3 days. Under the contract, 3 days late means a 30% deduction from the unpaid portion. Uncle Song could not hold back. Headmaster Gu, we've done everything we could. If you deduct 30%, there will be almost no profit left in this order. Gushin looked at me. Does Mission feel the same? Follow the contract. Uncle Song anxiously tried to speak again, but I put a hand on his arm. A contract could not count only when it favored me. If Gusun waived the penalty today out of sympathy, other people could later use their own hardship to demand that I tolerate delayed payments and broken promises. Gusun entered the deduction in the account. The remaining 42 bolts. 3 days. Agreed. After a pause he asked, you took the 43 defective bolts back? Yes. I haven't decided what to do with them. The Gu clan storeroom needs lining cloth. If the thickness is suitable, we can inspect some separately. I looked up. Headmaster Gu doesn't need to compensate the weaving house. It isn't compensation, he interrupted. The East Courtyard originally needed to purchase lining cloth as well. Cloth unsuitable for outer garments is not necessarily useless. That sentence gave me an idea. Back at Hanzhong, I had the 43 defective bolts sorted again. The sections where the thread was too tight were thicker and could be cut into garment linings. The sections where it was looser were soft enough for table mats, wrapping cloths, and aprons. Edges with uneven color could be cut into work gaiters and sleeve protectors for the women. Not one bolt needed to be entirely discarded. That was when Zhang Xinyang's skill revealed itself. She picked up a pair of scissors and, almost without measuring, cut cleanly along the grain to separate the good portions from the flawed. The lining pieces she cut were even more uniform than those of the workshop's previous cutting master. Did you learn this before? I asked. She lowered her eyes. My birth family once had a tailoring shop. Later the shop was given to my younger brother for his marriage, so I stopped doing this kind of work. Would you be willing to lead a small cutting group for now? She visibly panicked. Me, I can't. You did very well just now, but I've never managed people. Try for 3 days. I handed her the record book. If you make a mistake, correct it. No one knows everything the first time. She stared at the book, fingers slowly tightening around it. At last, she nodded. 3 days later, we delivered the remaining 42 bolts on schedule according to the revised deadline. The Gu clan also accepted 26 bolts worth of lining cloth. The order that had nearly produced no profit still left us with several dozen tails. More importantly, for the first time, Hanzhong Weaving House had completed a piece of business without depending on an old favor or anyone's charity. That night, Gusun and I sat in the accounts room, calculating loom maintenance costs. Uncle Song had already gone home. Only the duty workers remained in the courtyard, and the oil lamp burned quietly. I had been writing too long. My eyes began to ache. Gusun suddenly pushed a small bronze mirror across the table toward me. What is this for? There's ink on your face. I looked into the mirror. A thin black streak indeed marked my left cheek. I wiped it away with my handkerchief and could not help saying, Headmaster Gu, when you remind people of something, are you always this cryptic? I assumed you would understand when you saw the mirror. And if I didn't, then I would tell you. He lowered his head again and went back to the accounts. I stared at the mirror for a moment. In my previous life, Wen Xubai had occasionally brushed a fallen blossom from my hair. People saw gestures like that and said we were a loving couple. Yet when I truly needed him to speak, he did not. He punished me with silence, forced me to give way by leaving, and then called my concessions being sensible. Gushun had not touched me. He had merely pushed the mirror over and let me decide what to do. It was such a small thing, yet the tension carried across my shoulders for days slowly eased. Thank you, he looked up. No need, the mirror belongs to the weaving house, I laughed. He truly did not know how to say pleasant things. The next day, Wen Xubai and Su Wenlin's wedding invitation arrived. It was made of fine gold-flecked paper. The wedding was set for 1 month later. The person who delivered it was one of Su Wenlin's students. When she handed me the card, there was curiosity in her gaze as well as caution. Teacher Su said Miss Shin needn't force herself to attend if she doesn't wish to. The words sounded polite, but carried the consideration of a victor, as if my absence could only mean that I was unable to bear seeing them together. I opened the invitation and glanced at the 2 names printed side by side, Wen Xubai and Su Wenlin. The thing I had fought so desperately to stop in my previous life had now happened without obstruction. My chest did not hurt. It was more like opening a window that had been shut too long and letting years of dust blow out. Qingdai, prepare a congratulatory gift according to the ordinary etiquette for old acquaintances. The student blinked. Mission won't attend in person, teachers also said. Young Master Wen has been worried you might misunderstand. I handed the invitation to Qingdai. Tell her I won't. After the student left, Chuntao could not resist asking, Miss, aren't you even a little upset? Young Master Wen used to. She stopped halfway. I looked at the plain cloth drying in the courtyard. He is marrying the person he wanted to marry. That's a good thing. At least in this life, he can no longer blame me for whatever is unsatisfactory in his life. That afternoon, my father sent someone to summon me home. When I entered his study, a young woman in a faded brown dress was kneeling on the floor. A dark bruise marked the side of her face, and she clutched a small bundle tightly against her chest. My father looked grim. Her name is Zhang Sunyang. Her husband's family threw her out yesterday, yet the people at the shelter had the audacity to take her in without permission. I recognized her. She was the woman who had taken charge of our cutting work during the past few days. She already works at the weaving house. She has a husband. My father struck the table heavily. Husbands and wives quarrel. What married woman simply leaves and stays outside? Her husband's family came here today and accused the Chen family of encouraging another family's daughter-in-law to abandon her home. If this spreads, who will dare form a marriage alliance with us? Zhang Sunyang's shoulders trembled. You will send her back now, my father said. I looked at Zhang Sunyang. Do you want to go back? She gripped her bundle until her knuckles whitened and said nothing. My father said impatiently, what does a married woman understand about these matters? Keeping her here is what truly harms her. I crouched so I could meet Zhang Sunyang's eyes. I'm asking again, do you want to go back? Her lips had gone pale. After a long time she forced out 2 words. I don't. My father shot to his feet. Chen Lingyi! I did not look at him. Why not? I asked her. Tears fell from Zhang Sunyang's eyes. My husband owes gambling debts. He told me to go back to my parents and get silver. My parents already gave the tailoring shop to my younger brother. They have no money left. My husband beat me and said I couldn't enter his door again until I brought money back. My father said, a debt can be discussed slowly. But if you live outside your husband's house, you will lose your reputation and it will be even harder to return later. Zhang Sunyang shrank in on herself. The edge of her sleeve shifted, revealing bruises underneath. In my previous life, I had also told myself again and again that if I endured a little longer, everything would pass, but some doors only closed tighter after you went back through them. She will not go back today. My father stared at me. You'll sacrifice the Qin family's reputation for an outsider? I stood. I simply won't let anyone else make this decision for her. She may stay in the shelter for 3 months and exchange her cutting work for food and lodging. After 3 months, whether she returns to her husband's family, goes to her birth family, or rents a room of her own will be her choice. My father sneered. You think earning a few taels can solve the rest of her life? No. I looked at the small bundle in Zhang Sunyang's hands. But at least when she makes her decision, she won't have to bow her head merely because she has nowhere to sleep tonight. My father's face turned livid. If you keep her, the Chen family will not bear any consequence for you. I know. When I left the study, Zhang Sunyang followed behind me with hesitant steps. In a small voice she asked, Miss, what if after 3 months I still have nowhere to go? I stopped. The shelter is not meant to be somewhere you live for the rest of your life. The hope that had just appeared on her face slowly stiffened. I continued. But 3 months is enough time to learn basic accounts and save rent money. It is also enough time for me to decide whether you can stay at Hanzhong as a permanent worker. I won't promise to support you forever. I can only give you a period in which you don't have to kneel to anyone because you have nowhere else to go." Her tears fell harder. She nodded again and again. The next day, Guzhen heard what had happened and, as expected, came to the weaving house. "She has a husband. I know. If every wife who argues with her husband moves into your shelter, how many people do you intend to take? Does Headmaster Gu believe I should send her back? The elders of both families should first mediate." I set down the piece of cloth I was inspecting, and if mediation fails, if she is beaten even more seriously, Guzhen fell silent. I looked at him. Sending her back is easy, but the next time she is thrown out, will the people responsible for mediation be willing to bear the consequences of sending her back? The wind stirred the cloth drying in the courtyard. Guzhen did not answer. When he left, his expression was colder than when he arrived. I assumed the argument ended there. 5 days later, he returned to Hanzhong carrying a freshly drafted set of Gu clan regulations. It proposed that women of the clan who had been divorced, widowed, or temporarily had nowhere to live could choose either 3 months of grain support or temporary work in clan businesses. I turned to the last page. Headmaster Gu changed the proposal? It is only a draft. The clan has not agreed. Then why bring it to me? Because you were right, he said it while looking at the document, not at me. The person who mediates cannot simply be responsible for sending a woman back. My fingers stopped on the page. Headmaster Gu can admit when he is wrong? I only admit this clause needed changing, and the rest still requires consideration. I laughed. Before I could answer, someone outside called loudly, "Young Master Wen is here, sir." Wen Xubai had come in person to deliver his wedding invitation. He stood in the courtyard, looked at Zhang Sunyang, then at Guzhen. "It seems I've come at a bad time, you have." I accepted the invitation and handed it directly to Qingdai. Wen Xubai's expression tightened. "Lingji Wenlan and I marry in 10 days. It's written on the invitation. If you're willing to come, the weaving house has work." "You won't even look at it?" I raised my head. "Wen Xubai, what reaction are you hoping for?" He froze. I did not wait for an answer and turned back to checking Zhang Sunyang's wages. Silence lasted a long time behind me. In the end, Wen Xubai said nothing. He turned and left that evening. Yunzhou Girls' School sent a cancellation notice. The 50 sets of spring clothing we had already discussed were all cancelled. The reason was only one line. The school did not want its students wearing clothes made by women who had been cast out of wealthy households. For the first time, any shelter had truly become a burden on the weaving house, and this time, everyone was waiting to see what I would choose. After the girls' school cancelled, 2 more customers cancelled their business with us. Neither mentioned Zhang Sunyang directly. They only said their elders objected to Hanzhong housing women driven from their husbands' families. Uncle Song was so anxious he barely slept. Early the next morning he came to me. "Miss Zhang Sunyang is only a temporary worker. Have her move out for now. Once the gossip dies down, we can reconsider." Zhang Sunyang happened to be standing outside the door. She heard everything. Her face went white, but she did not come in to argue. I looked at the cash recorded in the ledger. We had only just caught up with wages and replaced the loom axle. If orders continued to fall, we would be short again next month. If she moves out, will all the other customers return? Uncle Song hesitated. It should improve things. If we drive Zhang Sunyang out today, tomorrow someone may object to the widows in the shelter. The next day they may say women with children are unlucky. How many people do we intend to throw out? But the weaving house has to survive. Then we change the way it survives. I called every worker into the courtyard. I did not hide the cancellations, and I did not make a stirring speech demanding that they share hardship with me. I placed the ledger on the table. The girls' school cancelled 50 sets of clothing. 2 households cancelled 30 bolts of cloth. Based on the money we have now, Hanzhong can still pay normal wages for 1.5 months. Discussion immediately broke out. Some looked toward Zhang Sunyang, who stood at the back of the group, growing paler by the moment. One woman spoke up. "Miss, it isn't that we can't tolerate her, but if the weaving house closes, all of us lose our food. That is why the shelter will change starting today." I took out the rules I had written the night before. It will no longer support residents indefinitely. New arrivals will first complete a 7-day trial work period. Those who can weave, those who can cut. Elderly or physically weak residents take on cooking, sorting goods, watching children, or other suitable work. Basic food and lodging are provided by Hanzhong. Wages are calculated separately according to work performed. No one may stay longer than 9 months without review. 3 months to learn, 6 months to work. At the end, Hanzhong will help residents look for rented rooms or longer-term work elsewhere, Chuntao asked. What if someone still hasn't found a place after 9 months? The cooperative meeting will decide whether to extend it. It will no longer be my decision alone. The cooperative? From today, any shelter will be renamed the Any Cooperative. I don't want it to be merely a place where people receive charity. People who live here are not anyone's objects of pity. They must work, take responsibility, and also have the right to participate in decisions. Zhang Sunyang suddenly stepped forward. I want to stay. Her voice trembled, but she did not lower her head. I can give up 1 month's wages, no. I looked at her. You work, you are paid. The weaving house's difficulty cannot be solved by saving money only from the weakest people. The courtyard quieted. Chuntao was the first to say, then I'll stay too. Aunt Liu sighed. I'm old, other places may not want me anyway. If Miss has the courage to carry this reputation, I'll keep weaving for a while. Not everyone agreed. 2 temporary workers collected the wages owed to them and left that same day. I did not try to stop them. Choosing to stay should never be forced by emotional debt. It was on that day that Gu Mingshu came to Hanzhong. She wore a light green dress. A Gu family maid followed her carrying several elementary reading books. I heard from my elder brother that most of the women in the cooperative cannot read or keep accounts. Her eyes resembled Gushen's slightly, but her temperament was entirely different. Her eyes shone when she spoke, like a gust of spring wind blowing into the courtyard. I can teach them reading and arithmetic. I did not agree immediately. Why does Miss Gu want to teach them? I've studied for more than 10 years. Surely all of it isn't meant only for copying Buddhist scriptures and writing dowry lists. And I want to know whether women who learn to keep accounts truly can live by their own ability. How much monthly teaching pay do you want? I asked. Gu Mingshu blinked. I don't want money. Why not? I'm helping. If you spend time teaching, you should be paid. If the Any Cooperative can survive only because Miss Gu works for free, it will not last either. Gu Mingshu looked at me for a moment, then suddenly laughed. No wonder my elder brother always says at home that Miss Chen likes turning favors into accounts. Headmaster Gu discusses me at home? The question slipped out before I realized it was inappropriate. Gu Mingshu's smile grew wider. He doesn't discuss you. He only says Hanzhong's accounts are harder to calculate than the Gu clan's farmland accounts. The tips of my ears grew warm. I lowered my head and opened the ledger. 2 taels a month for teaching. We'll sign for 3 months first. Gu Mingshu began teaching the women to read and calculate. At first, many did not want to learn. Aunt Liu said she was too old and it would be useless. Gu Mingshu started by teaching her to recognize her own name, then the numbers on her work card. The first time Aunt Liu checked her own wage slip and discovered that 20 copper coins had been recorded incorrectly. Everyone in the courtyard crowded around to see. She held the little account slip and laughed until the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepened. So these characters really are my name. Zhang Sunyang learned fastest. She already recognized some characters, but had never dared admit it. In less than half a month she could independently record cutting measurements. I formally put her in charge of a 3-person cutting group. I'm still afraid I'll do it badly, she said. Then check your work every day. What if someone refuses to listen to me? First ask why. If you're wrong, correct it. If she is being unreasonable, write down what happened and bring it up at the cooperative meeting. Miss won't manage it for me? I cannot manage things for you forever. She struggled with the idea for a moment, then slowly nodded. During this period, Gushen still came every few days to inspect the water wheel and review the contracts. He never stayed longer merely because Gu Mingshu was here, nor did he take the initiative to ask about the cooperative's internal affairs. Then one day, an older uncle from the Gui clan came with him to inspect cloth. The man saw me and laughed. So this is the mission who was discarded by the Wen family. The sound of the looms in the courtyard seemed to stop. Before I could speak, Guzhen looked at the man. Uncle remembers incorrectly. What was discarded was a marriage agreement. Miss Chen's name should not be placed after any man's name. His tone was not harsh, but the older uncle could no longer smile. I only said it casually. If it was casual, then it is even easier to correct. Stood several steps away, feeling something lightly strike my chest. Wen Xubai had defended me before too. But every time he defended me by emphasizing that I was his fiancé or his wife, someone belonging to the Wen family. Gushen had not placed me beneath anyone's name, he had simply called me Miss Shen. After the Gu party finished inspecting the goods that day, I walked them to the door. Headmaster, he stopped. Thank you for today. I only corrected a form of S. Even so, thank you. Gushen looked at me. You seem very accustomed to thanking people for things they should have done anyway. I was taken aback. He said nothing more and simply left that evening. Madame Wen arrived at Hanzhong with servants. She did not enter. Instead, she had an older maid unfold an old draft of my dowry list at the doorway. Miss Chen, when the two families first discussed marriage, South Garden was already written into the dowry. Now Xubai has married, and the Wen residence is too cramped. Old Madam says that since the Chen family once promised it, you should keep your word. The workers stopped what they were doing. I took the draft. South Garden was indeed listed on it. But at the top, a smaller line clearly read, "This list takes effect only if the marriage agreement between the Chen and Wen families is concluded." I looked at Madame Wen. She had come in person for more than the courtyard. She probably still believed that, as in my previous life, whenever the Wen family spoke, I would automatically yield. I slowly folded the paper. If old Madame Wen wants South Garden, she may have it. Satisfaction had barely appeared in her eyes before I continued. At market price. She clearly had not expected me to talk about money. Leaning on her servant's arm at the entrance, her expression cooled by degrees. Chen Lingji, although the two families did not marry in the end, we have known one another for years. South Garden was something you originally intended to bring into the Wen family. We are merely asking you to fulfill an old promise. The engagement was dissolved. The dowry arrangement therefore became void. Do you know how much gossip Xubai endured because you broke the engagement? Young Master Wen is already married. I assume the gossip has not prevented him from living his life. Madame Swen choked on her answer. The older servant beside her immediately said, "The new wife has only just entered the household. The Wen family has expenses everywhere. Miss Chen, if you truly value old ties, this is not the moment to calculate so carefully. Precisely because young Master Wen has married the woman he chose, the Wen family's expenses should no longer be borne by someone from his past." I told Uncle Song to bring out South Garden's deed. The property faced a street and had 3 main rooms, 4 side rooms, and half a dye pond at the rear. Land prices in the Western District had risen recently. If the Wen family wishes to buy property in the west of the city, I can sell South Garden at 5% below market price. Madame Wen's face darkened completely. You've become obsessed with money. Business requires discussing money. Your mother would never have counted every coin this way. My hand tightened around the deed. Mother would not have given her daughter's property to a family whose son had already married someone else either. Madame Wen's chest rose and fell. She likely wanted to scold me with the authority of an elder, as she once had, but I was no longer the future daughter-in-law of the Wen families. She no longer had that right. Do you think running one broken weaving house means you can refuse to marry for the rest of your life? She said coldly. A woman without a husband's family behind her may look impressive today, but sooner or later she will grow old alone. Then I will deal with that when sooner or later comes. Xubai was originally worried that you would live badly after breaking the engagement. It seems the Wen family worried for nothing. As she spoke his name, her eyes stayed fixed on my face, waiting for me to soften. I only returned the deed to Uncle Song. If old Madame Wen wishes to buy it, come sign a contract within 3 days. If not, South Garden will be rented out again next month. Madame Wen finally lost patience. If Su Wenlin were willing to put her mind on the household, why would the Wen family need your courtyard? The sentence left her mouth before she could stop it. I understood at once. Swenlan had not become the kind of wife the Wen family expected after marriage. Madame Wen had apparently held her grievances in too long. Once she began, she could not stop. She still goes to the girls' school every day. When she comes home, she shuts herself in her room to read. When I gave her the household accounts, she said she had already made it clear to Xubai before marriage that she would not resign her teaching position. When guests come, she refuses to sit with them. "Old madam," the servant whispered in warning. Madame Wen abruptly stopped. She saw the faint expression on my face and seemed to realize she was complaining about her new daughter-in-law in front of the former one. Her face grew even more unpleasant. In any case, think again about South Garden. There is nothing to think about, the price is already given. In the end, she did not buy it. 3 days later, I converted part of South Garden into a ready-made clothing workshop and rented another portion to a craftsman who made wooden shuttles. The rent was just enough to purchase 2 new looms. I did not deliberately inquire about Wen family affairs after the wedding. Half a month later, however, Su Wenlan came to see me herself. She wore a plain white dress with only a wooden hairpin in her hair. She looked entirely different from the bride, who had seemed about to obtain everything she wanted on the wedding invitation. She came without any student accompanying her and sent no notice ahead. I had King Daisei show her into the accounts room. Su Wenlan looked around. This place is different from what I imagined. What did Teacher Su imagine? I thought you were only trying to spite Xubai by going into business. And now? Now I don't understand, she sat at the table. There are several things I want to ask you. Go ahead. Were the Wen family's expenses always supposed to be paid from your dowry? I did not answer immediately. She continued. Xubai told me the Wen family was not wealthy but had several fields enough for daily life. Yet his mother says the residence for his younger brother's marriage, his younger sister's dowry, and the cost of her medicine had all already been arranged. Were those arrangements your money? The word yes nearly came out. I held it back. When our marriage was discussed, the Wen family did mention financial difficulties. My father planned to increase my dowry, and Hanzhong weaving house would have gone with me. So that is why they came to ask you for South Garden? Su Wenlin's fingers tightened. Xubai never told me. That is between you and your husband, Chen Lingyi. Did you know long ago that marrying him would be like this? I looked at her. There was exhaustion in her eyes and anger at having been kept ignorant. But she still had not truly seen what was happening. I only know that the life Wen Xubai promised you should be paid for by him. You cannot come to me to settle his promises. Su Wenlin's face paled slightly. I never wanted your things. But before accepting his promises, you never asked who would pay the cost of them. She looked up sharply. We faced one another across the accounting table. In my previous life, I had hated her. I hated that she knowingly accepted Wen Xubai's care while he had a wife. I hated that whenever she appeared, Wen Xubai forgot everything at home. I hated the way she stood behind him and looked at me with a mixture of pity and superiority. Now I no longer wanted to argue with her over which of us was more innocent. Teacher Su, if you want to keep teaching, then teach. If you do not want to manage the Wen household, make that clear to Wen Xubai. Just do not treat the dowry I might once have brought into that family as something your married life was naturally entitled to contain. Su Wenlin was silent for a long time. Why didn't you say this before? Say it to whom she did not answer. Wen Xubai would not have listened. Madame Wen would not have listened, and at that time Su Wenlin herself would have believed I was merely jealous. She stood at the door. She turned back. You truly don't care that I married him? I don't. She stared at my face for a moment, as if trying to find some sign of pretense. Finally, she said nothing and left. That evening, Gusun came with recent sale records for several properties near South Garden. How did Headmaster Gu know I needed these? The Wen family looked at an old Gu property and asked about prices. He placed the papers on the table. If you sell South Garden below this figure, you'll be taking a loss. Headmaster Gu isn't going to advise me to consider old feelings. Business and old feelings are different matters. And if I ask too much and the Wen family says I'm cruel, if they cannot afford it, they need not buy it. I laughed. Headmaster Gu's words are more pleasant than they used to be. You were less willing to hear them before. He turned to leave. Gu-san. It was the first time I had called him directly by name. He stopped. Thank you. He looked at me for a moment. These were transaction records I happened to obtain while dealing with Gu clan properties. Even so, thank you. He gave a quiet acknowledgement and walked 2 steps before stopping again. Chen Lingji. I looked up. You also do not need to thank me every time. Then he left. I remained where I was, feeling a faint warmth somewhere beneath my ribs. It was not because someone had solved a problem for me. It was because he gave me information on which to make my own judgment, rather than making the decision in my place. The next day, Proprietor Chen, the largest cloth merchant in Yunzhou, personally came to Hanzhong. After inspecting our fine cloth, ready-made pieces, and sturdy cloth bags, he offered terms that made Uncle Song's face change on the spot. For the next year, I will buy all the ordinary cloth Hanzhong produces. The price will be 5% above market, and I will pay a 500 tael deposit up front. Everyone in the courtyard held her breath. 500 taels would completely cover our old debts. I did not agree immediately. What is Proprietor Qian's condition? He smiled. Mission truly is clever. The condition is simple. Close the any cooperative, and from now on do not take in women who have been divorced, repudiated, or driven from their husbands' homes. The courtyard went utterly still. Zhang Sunyang stood in the doorway of the cutting room, her scissors slowly lowering in her hand. Proprietor Qian lifted his tea. Miss Chen, a business person, should understand. If a place has a bad reputation, even good goods will not sell for long. The 500 tael banknotes lay on the table. Everyone's eyes turned to me. This time the decision was not only whether one woman could stay, it was whether Hanzhong could immediately secure its survival. When Proprietor Chen left, he gave me 3 days to decide. He left the 500 tael notes on the table. Think carefully, Miss Chen. Agree, and we can sign tomorrow. He was certain I would accept. He was not the only one. Even Uncle Song felt there was almost no reason to refuse. Miss, the cooperative could pause for a while, he urged quietly that night in the accounts room. Once the weaving house is stronger, we can reopen it. How long is a while? Half a year? A year? Where do the residents go? Uncle Song fell silent. Zhang Sunyang could now independently lead the cutting group. Aunt Liu could check her own wages. They no longer depended entirely on the cooperative, but 4 newly arrived women were still learning to weave. 2 had children. 1 had difficulty walking. Closing the cooperative meant they would have to leave immediately. Chuntao sat by the door and said softly, "If we don't agree, proprietor, Qian might persuade other cloth merchants not to buy from us either." "Do you think we should agree?" I asked. She bit her lip. "I don't know." "Then say you don't know." I looked at the others in the courtyard. "Tomorrow we discuss it together." Late that night, I remained alone in the accounts room. The 500-tael banknotes were pressed beneath the paperweight. They were enough to buy new looms, repair the dye ponds, settle every old debt, and even give each worker 2 extra months of wages. In my previous life, I had made many choices that seemed reasonable at the time. When Madame Wen fell seriously ill, I diverted shop income to medicine first. When Wen Xubai's younger brother needed to marry, I sold my jewelry at a discount to buy him a residence. When Su Wenlin's reputation was damaged, Wen Xubai told me that if I only nodded, she would have somewhere to live. Every time people told me it was only a temporary concession. But as I kept retreating, little by little I disappeared. I picked up the banknotes. The paper was light, yet in my palm it felt heavy as stone. Footsteps sounded outside. Gusun pushed the door open. "You haven't gone home?" "Headmaster Gu hasn't either. The water wheel had an issue today." Then he noticed the banknotes. News of proprietor Qian's offer traveled quickly. "He went to the Gu clan today as well." I looked up. "Did he also demand that you close something?" "He demanded that the Gu family promise not to supply goods to any other merchant for 1 year." "Did the Gu clan agree?" "No." "Why?" "A single buyer can make the accounts look excellent immediately. He can also leave you with no bargaining power 1 year later." He walked to the table. "The order is not what you're truly hesitating over." I did not deny it. "The weaving house is not mine alone. If everyone loses her livelihood because of the any cooperative, does what I'm insisting on still have meaning?" Gu Xin did not tell me what I ought to do as Wen Xubai would have. He only asked, "How much does the cooperative require each month now?" 27 taels. "How much of that is actual relief that cannot be offset by work?" I opened the ledger. Food and lodging cost money, so did children's necessities. But the portion that could not be covered by labor was less than 9 taels. If the cooperative closes, how much net profit would proprietor Qian's contract bring in 1 year? About 400 taels. If you do not sign it, how long can your current small orders keep the weaving house running? 3 months. Then your choices are not limited to accepting his condition or closing your doors. I stared at the figures in the ledger. I had fallen back into the familiar way of thinking from my previous life. Either I bore everything or I abandoned everything. But running something real was never that simple. The next day I did not answer proprietor Qian immediately. Instead, I first had each workgroup break down every order from the previous 3 months. Hanzhong's highest profit came from silk, but silk sold slowest. The fastest payment came from ordinary ready-made clothes, bedding, cloth bags, and lining fabric. We did not need one large merchant to buy everything. We needed more small customers. I reduced production of expensive silk, converted 2 looms to wide coarse cloth, and introduced standardized spring garments and aprons. Customers could place orders with a 30% deposit. Gu Mingshu pointed out that although the girls' school had cancelled, several private schools in the city needed book bags and shopkeepers needed work aprons. 3 days later, when proprietor Qian returned, I pushed the banknotes back to him. "I'm sorry. Hanzhong Weaving House will not sign an exclusive supply agreement." He narrowed his eyes. "You're giving up business for those abandoned women?" "I intend to do business. I simply refuse to put everyone's rice bowl into one person's hands, proprietor." Qian laughed. "You think these petty little orders can keep you alive? How long Hanzhong survives is Hanzhong's problem." He gathered the banknotes and the friendliness disappeared from his face. "Don't regret this later." I did not answer. The word regret could no longer force me to bow my head. After he left, Uncle Song remained deeply worried. I did not soothe him with empty words like "trust me." I spread out our new sales plan. In-bed curtains, private school book bags, work aprons, spring clothing, garment linings. No individual item had a high margin, but none depended on a single buyer. Try it for 1 month. If it doesn't work, we change again. Hanzhong entered its busiest period, yet every day I went out to find customers myself, carrying samples to inns, private schools, and shops. Some rejected us because of the any cooperative, others cared only about quality and price. The first week brought only 20 taels of orders. The second 40. In the third week, a newly opened restaurant ordered 60 sets of aprons and tablecloths. The money was modest, but the hole in our accounts shrank bit by bit. One day, when I returned to Hanzhong, Gushin was waiting in the courtyard, holding a folded document. What is that? A revised agreement concerning property after marriage. I looked at him. Headmaster Gu is getting married? The tips of his ears seemed to stiffen slightly. No. Then why give it to me? Last time you said a contract should write the worst possible outcome down in advance. He placed the document on the table. I unfolded it. A wife's property owned before marriage remained hers. Household expenses would be discussed according to both spouses' incomes. Neither side could dispose of the other's assets without permission. If either spouse voluntarily took on expenses for the other's spouse's family, the amount and the time limit had to be written clearly. At the end was another line. Gushin does not intend to take a concubine. This is his own choice, and has nothing to do with whether his wife is considered jealous. My gaze stopped there. My throat felt as if something had lodged in it. In my previous life, what I most wanted to hear from Wen Xubai was not, "I won't take a concubine for your sake." I wanted to hear, "This is my own choice. You don't have to bear the stigma for it." Gushin did not rush me. After a long time, I asked, "Why me?" "Because the person I want to marry is you," he answered calmly. There was no passionate vow, no moonlit romance beneath blossoms, yet every word landed solidly. "Chen Lingyi, I will not look down on you because you broke an engagement, nor will I think more highly of you merely because you have made the weaving house profitable. I simply believe we can live a life in which things are made clear." I looked at the clauses on the page. My fingers trembled faintly. "I cannot say yes now. I know. And I will not believe that marriage can ever change simply because you wrote these things down. Then we can keep changing the document." His openness made the tip of my nose sting. I picked up the brush and added a final line. "If there is disagreement, neither party may punish the other with silence." Gushin read it for a long time. "This is your boundary?" "Yes. I am not good at arguing. That is exactly why silence cannot be used to force me to surrender first." He took the brush and pressed his fingerprint beneath the clause. Agreed. I had not accepted his proposal. But when he left that day, it was the first time a man had spoken of a future with me without making me instinctively want to escape. What I feared had never truly been marriage. I feared being required to make myself smaller again in order to prove I deserved to be loved. And Gushin had placed before me a document that could be revised, argued over, or rejected. That night, rain began to fall. As it grew heavier, the gatekeeper suddenly came to report, "Miss, young Master Wen is outside. He says he must see you." I went to the gate. Wen Xubai stood in the rain, half his clothes soaked. The composure he once wore so easily was gone. "Lingyi. Wenlan has moved back to the girls' school. I'm preparing to divorce her." He looked at me with an urgency in his eyes I had never seen in my previous life. "I know I was wrong. Come back." Standing in the rain, Wen Xubai looked exactly like the man I had imagined countless times in my previous life. I had once dreamed that one day he would stand before me and admit he was wrong. He would say he finally understood how much I had done for the Wen family. He would say his relationship with Su Wenlin was not what I thought. He would ask us to start again. I waited until I died and never received it. Now he had finally come. All I felt was the chill of the rainy night. "Come inside first." I had the gatekeeper open the side gate. A flash of hope entered Wen Xubai's eyes. But I led him only to the accounts room in the outer courtyard, not into the inner residence. Qingdai brought hot tea. His fingers were white with cold around the cup. "Wenlan is not suited to being a wife at all." That was the first thing he said after sitting down. I looked at him. "After marriage, she still goes to the girls' school every day. She refuses to take over the household accounts. When mother is ill, she only tells servants to summon a physician. She says she has her own work and cannot spend all her time on the Wen household. Didn't you know that before you married?" She said she would continue teaching, but I thought that after marriage she would naturally understand what mattered more. "She did not decide that for you." Wen Xubai's face grew ugly. Husband and wife should understand one another. I slowly turned the teacup. "What have you understood for her?" He was speechless. "I never stopped her from going to the girls' school." "Then who bears the household work?" "Mother could have. Madam Wen takes medicine year-round and has little energy. Your younger brother's marriage, your younger sister's dowry, family obligations, purchases for the household. Who is responsible for all of that?" His lips moved. "Those things were arranged before." He fell silent. Those arrangements had been me, my dowry, my time, my energy. He had simply never looked closely enough to see it. Wen Xubai raised his head. "Lingyi, I only understand now. I neglected you before. I'm willing to make it up to you." "How?" I can formally propose again. Half the Wen residence can be put in your name. You can control the household accounts from now on. He sounded sincere. In my previous life, I would likely already have softened. Now every condition exposed what he truly needed. You can control the household accounts meant I would still be the one managing them. Wen Xubai, if Su Wenlan agreed today to quit the girls' school, hand over her teaching stipend, care for your mother, and arrange your younger siblings' marriages, would you still have come looking for me? The urgency on his face froze. Rainwater fell from the eaves with crisp, distinct sounds. I did not press him. He still could not answer. You have not finally understood how much I suffered, I said. You have merely discovered that life is difficult when no one is carrying it for you. His face gradually drained of color. Lingji, must you twist my meaning this way? I'm not twisting it. What you miss is not me. You miss someone who pays the bills for you. He stood abruptly. Tea spilled from his cup. You've run a weaving house for a few months and now believe you can see through everyone? At least I can see through you. I was willing to come back because I still have you in my heart. Before you came back, you already knew Hanzong had turned a profit. You knew South Garden had been rented out again. You knew I had not lived miserably after breaking the engagement. I met his gaze. If I were still sitting at home crying and waiting for you, would you have come back? He fell silent. The silence itself was the answer. I stood. Young Master Wen, the rain has eased. Go home. Anger appeared in his eyes. You're going to marry Gu soon? That is my affair. How is he better than me? He would not ask me that question. I told Qingdai to see him out at the doorway. Wen Xubai suddenly turned. Qinlingyi, the Gu family may not tolerate the any cooperative. Do you think Gu Shun can keep sounding so understanding after marriage while you show your face in public every day? I looked at him. If he cannot, I will not marry him. I am no longer someone who must cling to a marriage at any cost. The door closed between us. After that rainy night, rumors about Hanzhong suddenly multiplied. People said the cooperative existed specifically to shelter women who refused to obey their husbands. People said Hanzhong's workforce was unstable and there was no guarantee goods could be delivered. Others said I had deliberately approached Gusun after breaking my engagement and was using Guzu family water wheels and orders to keep the workshop alive. None of those rumors were invented entirely from nothing. The Any cooperative did take in women driven from their husbands' homes. Hanzhong did rent a Gu water wheel and had long-term business with the Gu clan. The most troublesome rumors were never pure lies. They took one piece of truth and wrapped the most malicious interpretation around it. Proprietor Qian began persuading several cloth merchants to stop buying Hanzhong's goods. 3 small customers, who had been ready to sign contracts, all delayed at once. Yunzhou's spring cloth fair was approaching. Every weaving house would display goods there and compete for orders for the coming year. If Hanzhong lost its credibility before the fair, half a year's work could disappear in one stroke. When Gu Xin came to Hanzhong, he brought the Gu clan's decision. They are going to reconsider my position managing clan property. My brush stopped. Because of the water wheel agreement? Because they believe my dealings with Hanzhong are too close. You can suspend cooperation for now. He looked at me. The contract has not expired. If the Gu family forcibly takes back the water wheel, I can find another way. That is a different matter, he said calmly. I signed the agreement, I will fulfill it. But you may lose your position in the clan. That position is something the clan has every right to review. I could not help saying, Ju Shun, you don't need to do this for me. It isn't for you. The sentence sounded cold, but it did not hurt. I already knew what would follow. It's for the name I wrote on the agreement myself. He pointed to the water wheel contract on the table. Chen Lingyi, supporting you does not mean I will solve every problem for you. I am only taking responsibility for the part that belongs to me. Something that had been suspended in my chest settled gently into place. Fine, I'll handle the spring cloth fair myself. He watched me for a moment. Do you need the Gu clan's past inspection records? Yes, I'll send them tomorrow. Gu! He stopped. If you truly lose your position, will you regret it? I will. The answer surprised me. He continued. I spent 7 years organizing the Gu clan's property. If they remove me, of course I will regret losing that work. But regret does not mean I should break a contract. I looked at him and suddenly smiled. I used to think a truly determined person would never regret a choice. Determination and regret are not opposites, Gu Xin said. Regret if you must. But afterward you still admit that the choice was yours. Those words were like a lamp, illuminating the greatest obsession I had carried from my previous life. I'd always wanted Wen Xubai to admit that he chose Su Wenlan, that he chose to neglect me. Instead, he blamed everything on helpless circumstances. Gu Xin would not do that. He allowed himself to regret, but he still carried his own decisions. 7 days before the spring cloth fair, Hanzhong had finished preparing all the goods for exhibition. The night before the fair, 3 major customers sent cancellation notices at the same time. Nearly 200 bolts of cloth that had already been reserved were now stacked in our warehouse. At last, the workers could no longer sit calmly. Miss, Chunto said, setting the cancellation papers on the table. If we cannot sell at the fair either, what happens to next month's wages? Another worker said, maybe proprietor Qian's condition wasn't as unreasonable as we thought. The cooperative could move elsewhere. Why must it be tied to Hanzhong? Zhang Sunyang's face went white. She did not argue. She only said softly, if it is because of us, the cooperative can close. Everyone looked at me. In the past, I could decide every matter at Hanzhong with a single sentence. At that moment, I suddenly understood that if the any cooperative was truly going to survive, it could not depend on my insistence alone. Stop work for half a day tomorrow. I close the ledger. Everyone gets a vote. I will disclose exactly how much money we have, how many orders are owed, and what the worst possible result may be. Whether to stay or leave is not something I will decide for you. But those who stay also cannot simply wait for me to save everything. The next morning, for the first time, the looms at Hanzhong did not begin clattering. Every permanent worker, temporary worker, and resident of the any cooperative sat in the courtyard. I put the ledger on the long table. Current cash, Matum Tamasao tails. Finished cloth cancelled by customers. Wages due next month. Matum Wei Hai tails. Water wheel and dye pond rent. Haimasao tails. Current outstanding debt Banba tails. If the spring cloth fair produces no new orders, Hanzhong can last at most 40 days. No one spoke. Numbers sobered people more effectively than rumors. Anyone who wants to leave may settle all wages earned up to today, I continued. Those who remain must share the risks of reducing work, converting unsold goods and finding new buyers. A temporary worker asked, if the business loses money, will Miss make up the loss? I have the largest amount of money and property invested here, so I will lose the most, but I will not take more money from the Chen family. Chuntu raised her hand. Then who decides what goods we make? Starting today, each work group will elect one representative. Large orders, changes in wages, and rules of the cooperative will be decided by the representatives together. Uncle Song was startled. Miss, wouldn't that mean everyone can interfere in management? If they share the consequences of a loss, they should know how the decisions that create that loss are made. What if opinions differ? Vote, and if the vote is wrong, then we bear the result together. It had been my habit to take every responsibility onto myself. I believed that was the only way others could feel secure, but if one person bears everything, it also means everyone else can never truly become an owner of the work. The meeting lasted the entire morning. Some argued for closing the cooperative. Some proposed cutting everyone's wages. Others suggested selling the returned cloth cheaply to traders from farther away. In the final vote, the any cooperative remained open by a margin of 1 vote. Wages would not be reduced for now, but the cooperative would temporarily stop accepting new residents. The returned cloth was divided into 3 groups. Some would be taken to the spring cloth fair, some remade into ready-to-buy clothing, and the rest sold cheaply to inns and farms. 5 temporary workers chose to leave. Everyone else stayed. Zhang Sunyang was elected representative of the cutting group. When she stood, she still looked nervous, but her voice was steadier than the day she first arrived. We are not staying because Miss pities us. And we don't want other people to say Miss supports all of us like dependents. If we cannot sell at the spring cloth fair, the cutting group can give up half a month's bonus. I did not refuse, it was their choice. On the day of the spring cloth fair, weaving houses from all over Yunzhou set up displays in the city guild hall. Proprietor Qian had the largest stall, hung with magnificent silks and surrounded by an endless stream of merchants. Hanzhong's position was near a side entrance. We had no elaborate decorations. We displayed plain cloth, shirts, book bags, aprons, and several sets of ready-made clothing in different sizes. Not long after the fair opened, someone called loudly, I heard most of Hanzhong's women are wives who ran away from their husbands' families. With workers that unstable, who dares place a long-term order? It was proprietor Qian. Beside him stood several merchants and Wen Xubai. Wen Xubai did not speak. He only watched me with a grave expression, as if waiting for me to humiliate myself. I stepped in front of our stall. The any cooperative does indeed shelter women who temporarily have nowhere to live. During the last 6 months, 13 temporary workers have left Hanzhong. 2 permanent workers have left. A stir ran through the crowd. They had not expected me to admit it directly. Then how do you guarantee delivery? Someone demanded. Through division of labor, replacement training, and written records, I had Chuntao bring out the work history books. At least 2 workers know every production stage. If one person leaves, another can take over. During the last 6 months, Hanjiang completed 47 orders. 1 was late, 2 were returned. We paid the contract penalty on the late order. Both returned orders were completely remade. We did not pass defective goods off as good. Proprietor Qian laughed. Those ledgers were written by your own people. Who knows whether they are true? They can be checked. I placed inspection receipts from the Gu clan, inns, and several private schools on the table. The evidence was not secret. Those records had always existed. No one had cared before about how a small weaving house delivered its goods. Gusin stood outside the crowd. He did not speak for me. On behalf of the Gu clan, he handed copies of prior inspection records to the guild steward, responsible for registering sales at the fair. The steward randomly chose 10 bolts from our shelves, measured their width, tug-tested the weave, and soaked them in water on the spot. 9 past 1 had a slightly loose edge. I did not argue. I had it placed separately on the seconds rack. One merchant sneered. You found a defective piece in public and still dare claim your quality is stable? Zhang Sunyang stepped out from behind the stall. She inspected that bolt for a moment. The loose edge cannot be used for an entire garment, but it can still be cut for lining. She took scissors and cut along the hidden grain, separating the flawed section into usable pieces, then brought out a sample garment that had been lined the same way. Hanzong does not promise that every inch of cloth will never have a problem, she said. Her voice still trembled slightly, but she did not step back. We promise not to hide a problem and sell it to a customer as though it did not exist. Gu Mingshu then displayed the workers' own records of hours and material loss. Here, every person can recognize her own name and wages, how much she made, how much was rejected, how much she was paid. It can all be checked in the accounts. The murmuring in the crowd began to change. An innkeeper stepped forward and rubbed one of the aprons between his fingers. The 30 sets my inn ordered last time were delivered on time. A private school teacher recognized our book bags. These cost less than those from the south of the city, and the stitching is strong. Not everyone was convinced, but business never required everyone to agree. It required only that the people who genuinely examine the goods be willing to buy them. At that moment, Su Wenlin entered the guild hall with several girls from the school. She wore the blue-green robe of a teacher. Her expression was calm. Wen Xubai's face changed sharply. Su Wenlin did not look at him. She walked directly to Hanzhong's stall. The girls' school needs 40 sets of garments and 100 book bags. The hall abruptly quieted. Someone asked, didn't Teacher Su previously cancel an order from Hanzhong? Yes, she said openly. At that time, the school was worried by the rumors and canceled the cooperation. We have now re-inspected the samples and are willing to place an order at market price. Proprietor Qian gave a cold laugh. Teacher Su has only just married young Master Wen, yet now you're coming to support his former fiancé. Isn't that strange? Su Wenlin finally turned toward Wen Xubai. Wen Xubai and I have already signed a divorce agreement. The crowd erupted. Wen Xubai's face turned livid. That is a private matter between husband and wife. Today you are standing here as my husband and affecting the girls' school's purchasing decisions, she said. Then it is no longer only a private matter. Su Wenlan did not look at me. She faced the crowd. I once believed that because Wen Xubai was willing to support my continuing to teach, he truly understood me. Only after marriage did I realize he was willing for me to keep my ideals because he assumed someone else would automatically shoulder the household burdens before. So that person was supposed to be Chen Lingyi. I once treated her refusal as jealousy. I also took Wen Xubai's preference for me as proof that I was cherished. She paused. That was my mistake. I felt no satisfaction at the apology. Some harm does not disappear simply because someone finally admits it, but at least she had finally seen the cost. The girls' school order was not large, but it encouraged several small merchants, who had been watching from the sidelines, to begin asking prices. An inn ordered 40 sets of bed curtains. Yongsua Private School placed an order for book bags. The Gu clan renewed its order for spring clothing for its tenant households at the original price. No single large merchant bought all our goods. But when the spring cloth fair ended, the scattered orders we had received were enough to keep Hanzhong running steadily for half a year. Proprietor Qian looked displeased, but could say nothing. He had not been defeated by some sudden noble benefactor. He had simply assumed that one small weaving house could not survive without him. Wen Xubai stood among the dispersing crowd. He came to me. Lingji, are you satisfied? Now that things have turned into this? What does young Master Wen mean? Wenlin and I are divorcing. The Wen family has become the subject of gossip. Meanwhile, your weaving house has used the situation to make a name for itself. I looked at him. Whether Suwenlin divorces you is her choice. Whether Hanzhong survives is the result of the last 6 months of our work. There is not one account among them that requires an explanation to you. He clenched his jaw. Don't forget we almost married. Exactly because we almost did, I am even more grateful that we didn't. His face went deathly pale. I stopped looking at him and turned to gather our contracts. By sunset, most people had left the guild hall. Gu Shun was still outside. He did not behave like a hero from a romance tale, and publicly propose at the moment of my greatest triumph. He simply walked down the steps beside me. At the beginning, we agreed to give each other 1 year. There are 3 months left. I glanced at him. Headmaster Gu keeps track of the date very precisely. A date written into an agreement should be remembered. And after 3 months? He stopped. The sunset rested on his shoulder. Chen Lingyi, are you willing to let me keep waiting? He was not pressuring me to answer immediately. He was not exchanging today's support for marriage. He was only asking whether I would let him wait until the period we had agreed upon was complete. I looked at him. In my previous life, I had waited an entire lifetime for someone who did not want to come. In this one, someone was willing to remain where he stood and leave the choice to me. All right, I said. Wait 3 months. After the spring cloth fair, Hanzhong did not become Yunzhou's largest weaving house overnight. There were more orders, and therefore more problems. The girls' school wanted the garments in a uniform color. 2 private schools needed different sizes of book bags. An inn needed its bed curtains delivered within a month. Meanwhile, newly hired temporary workers had not fully learned our division of labor. At the first representative meeting after the fair, the groups genuinely argued for the first time. Chunto wanted to do the inn order first because it had the highest profit. Zhang Sunyang argued that the girls' school order had the tightest deadline. Aunt Liu worried that if the new looms ran continuously, they would wear down again. In the past, everyone would have turned to me and waited for me to decide. This time, I made them calculate the work hours and profit themselves. They argued for half a day. At last, they agreed to finish the girls' school garments first. New learners in the Any cooperative would practice by making book bags. Experienced workers would rotate shifts on the inn's bed curtains. It was not a perfect arrangement. On the 3rd day, a batch of book bags came out in the wrong dimensions. Gu Mingshu immediately admitted she had omitted 1 line when teaching the newcomers how to record sizes. Under the new rules, the loss was shared by the literacy teaching group and the cutting group rather than being covered by me alone. Gu Mingshu stared mournfully at the bonus deducted from the ledger. So writing 1 line wrong truly does cost me half a month of snacks. Zhang Sunyang laughed aloud for the first time. Miss Gu will remember it more firmly next time. Hanzhong was gradually becoming something that did not belong only to me, that gave me more peace than simply earning silver. 2 months later, the first 3 residents left the Any cooperative. One rented a room near her birth family and supported herself by washing clothes for others. One entered an inn as a permanent needleworker. Zhang Sunyang did not leave Hanzhong. Instead, she used her savings to rent a tiny storefront beside South Garden. I want to accept some private tailoring work, she said, bringing the lease to me. I'll still work at Hanzhong during the day and do my own business in the evenings. Can you handle that much? I'll try it for 3 months. She had learned one of my favorite phrases. I helped her calculate the rent and fabric costs. I did not lend her money and did not guarantee the shop in Hanzhong's name. What if you have no customers the first month? I'll still have my wages from Hanzhong. And if you lose money for all 3 months? Then I'll close it. She paused, then added, closing it won't mean the sky falls. I looked at her. When I first met Zhang Sunyang, she had not even dared raise her head while deciding whether to return to her husband's house. Now she understood that one failed business did not mean her life had failed. Good. I returned the lease. When you open, I'll buy the first garment. Miss needn't take care of my business. It isn't taking care of you. I looked at my own sleeves, old and faintly stained with ink from the accounts room. I genuinely need a new dress. Zhang Sunyang smiled. During those same 3 months, Gu Mingshu made her own decision. After seeing what she had accomplished teaching workers arithmetic and accounts, the girls' school invited her to teach a practical arithmetic class. At first, the Gu family objected. A young woman publicly teaching bookkeeping was considered too unconventional. Gu Mingshu did not ask Gu Shun to fight for her. She took her 3 months of teaching records and personally discussed them with the clan elders. In the end, the Gu family agreed to let her teach for only half a year on trial. She came back complaining that the elders were stubborn, yet her eyes shone. Half a year then. If the students still want to learn afterward, surely the elders cannot cover everyone's eyes. I was happy for her. It also made me understand more clearly that Gu Shun was not the only person capable of changing the Gu family. Everyone was fighting for room around her own choices. The day before my 3-month agreement with Gu Shun ended, my father came to Hanzhong. He rarely entered the place. His brow remained furrowed as he walked through, as though he still disliked the noisy traffic of women workers and could not get used to children running around the any cooperative courtyard. I showed him the accounts. Hanzhong had paid off all old debts. We had enough cash to cover 3 months of wages. During the previous quarter, every order had been delivered on time. Only 2 had been returned, and both had already been remade. My father turned to the last page and remained silent for a long time. Even when your mother was alive and the weaving house was at its most prosperous, its accounts were never like this. Mother relied on relationships. I only know how to make things explicit. He looked up. Do you still resent me for trying to make you marry Wen Xubai? His expression shifted slightly. I continued. I don't anymore. Not because father was right, but because my marriage is no longer yours to decide. His face grew complicated. From his sleeve he took a wooden box. Inside were the seals and documents controlling all the property my mother had left me. Before, he had given me only Hanzheng's working seal while keeping the master seals for the fields in South Garden. Now he returned all of them. I still do not approve of the uncooperative. If married women from other families can simply move in, sooner or later there will be trouble. I know. You have no intention of closing it? No, my father sighed. You're like your mother. Once you've decided something, no one can persuade you. If mother truly could not be persuaded, Hanzhong would not have had so much silver drawn away to support other Chen businesses. The words were harsh. My father gripped the teacup and did not speak for a long time. I wronged her. It was the first time he had admitted it. He did not suddenly become an enlightened father who supported every woman living independently. But he finally acknowledged that some of the decisions made in the name of the family had indeed taken things away from my mother. Keep the seals safely, he said. From now on, I will no longer decide your marriage for you. When he rose and left, his back seemed older than it had a year earlier. I did not chase after him to say I forgave him. Some cracks between parent and child do not need to be pretended away. Being able to live with boundaries was enough. The next morning, Wen Xubai came to Hanzhong. He looked different from the man who had come in the rain. His clothes were neat and his expression much calmer. He carried an old brocade box. I only want to say a few things. I let him into the outer courtyard. He opened the box. Inside was a white jade pendant. This was the betrothal jade the Wen family intended to send when we made the formal proposal. In our previous arrangement it was prepared for you, but because the marriage ended, it was never actually handed over. Mother found it while sorting old things. She said it should be returned to you. It was never mine. Then consider me bringing it today as an apology. I did not take it. Wen Xubai looked down at the jade. His voice lowered. I used to believe I never needed to worry about family affairs. Mother would manage them, a wife would manage them. My younger siblings would naturally find their own paths as they grew. I only needed to teach, read, and do the things I wanted to do. Wen said I was hypocritical. He gave a bitter smile. She said I claimed to admire independent women. But what I truly wanted was a wife who buried herself in household work. I listened quietly. She was right at last. Wen Xubai looked up at me. In my previous life, he never understood any of this. In this life, he had finally seen himself. Lingji, I treated everything you willingly did as something natural. The moment you refused, I thought you had changed. I accused you of using your dowry to control the Wen family. In truth, the person who wanted to control you was me. He set the brocade box on the table. I'm sorry. I had waited too long for that sentence in my previous life. Now that I finally heard it, my heart was unexpectedly calm. Wen Xubai, what you understand today belongs to you. I no longer need your understanding to prove that I was not wrong back then. His eyes reddened slightly. You can't forgive me. I can stop hating you. But forgiveness does not mean starting again. He remained silent for a long time, then finally picked the jade back up. I understand. This time, he did not ask me to wait. He did not say he would return later. When he walked through the courtyard gate, sunlight fell on Hanzhong's newly restored signboard. The 4 characters of its name had been freshly gilded. About an hour later, Gu Xin's formal proposal procession arrived at the Chen residence. He was a full hour early. Someone laughed and said young Master Gu had been afraid of being late and had begun urging the servants to count the gifts before dawn. I stood behind a screen and listened while my father and Guzun checked every betrothal gift line by line. There were no expensive objects added without discussion, and nothing intended to advertise the Gu family's generosity. Every item was something the two sides had discussed beforehand. One Gu elder asked, "Will Miss Chen still go to the weaving house every day after marriage?" "Yes," Gu Shen answered. "A woman must put her household first after marriage. Hong Weaving House and the NE Cooperative were already part of her life before we married. If I choose to ask for her hand, I have no right to demand that she first discard half of herself." Behind the screen, Qingdai quietly wiped her tears. I smiled. In my previous life, I imagined that being firmly chosen must feel earth-shattering. It turned out to be much simpler. Someone arrived at the agreed time. Someone made every condition clear. Someone faced questions from his own family without pushing responsibility onto me. My father sent someone behind the screen to ask what I wanted. I stepped out. When Gusin saw me, tension flashed in his eyes for an instant, so he could be nervous too. He could also fear rejection. Strangely, that made everything feel more equal. "Gusin, add one more clause to that agreement." The Gu elders' faces changed slightly. Gushin only asked, "What clause?" "If Hanzhong loses money, you may not use Gu clan property to subsidize it." He paused. "Likewise, if Gu clan property loses money, I may not use my weaving house to subsidize it." "Agreed." "And if we argue because of our separate work, we do not punish one another with silence." He remembered. I extended my hand. "Then stamp it." The wedding was set for the following spring. I did not stop working at Hanzhong while waiting for the wedding. Gushun did not begin interfering more often, merely because our engagement was settled. He still collected the water wheel rent according to contract. When the Gu clan needed cloth, he still inspected it normally. Once, the Gu clan returned 5 bolts with uneven dyeing. Chuntao complained all afternoon. "We're almost family, and Headmaster Gu still picks faults like this." I had her re-dye the cloths. "Precisely because we're almost family, the accounts must be even clearer." When Gushin later heard what I had said, he replied, "I was actually worried you might start giving the Gu clan discounts. Headmaster Gu has beautiful dreams." Then all is well. We still argued. When the NE Cooperative wanted to expand its sleeping quarters, Gusun thought our current income was not enough to support it. I believed the orders after the spring cloth fair were stable enough to prepare early. We argued in the accounts room for half a day, neither convincing the other. Then Gekshin fell silent for a moment. I looked at him immediately. The agreement, he seemed to realize what I meant. I was recalculating. "You may calculate. You may not stop talking until I give way." So he actually began speaking again, listing the following year's maintenance costs, grain prices, and risks of empty rooms, one by one in the end. Both of us yielded a little. We repaired 5 rooms first. After 3 months, we would examine occupancy and income, and then decide whether to continue. Neither of us won, neither punished the other afterward. That night in the carriage back to the Chen residence, I suddenly began crying. Qingdai was frightened. "Miss, what is wrong?" I shook my head. I was only remembering countless silent nights in my previous life. Back then, I always believed that if I lowered my head first, life could continue. Only now did I understand that a life capable of continuing did not require the same person to bow every time. 1 month before the wedding, Zhang Sunyang's tailoring shop officially opened. She did not hang Han Zhang's name on it. The shop was tiny, with only 1 table and 2 garment racks. I went to order a spring dress. When she took my measurements, her hands no longer trembled. "What style would Miss like?" "Simple. Sleeves that are convenient for working." "For the wedding?" "Not the wedding robe. The family embroiderers are making that." She laughed. "Does Headmaster Gu know that after marriage you still plan to go to the weaving house in work clothes? If he objects, there is still time to break the engagement." Gushin's voice sounded from outside at exactly that moment. "There is no time." He entered carrying a wooden box. Zhang Sunyang immediately made an excuse about finding thread in the back courtyard and disappeared. I looked at Gushin. "Why are you here?" "Mingshu said you were here." He placed the box down. Inside was a newly made bronze key. "The Gu family has a small residence beside the weaving house. We can live there after marriage." I frowned. "Didn't the Gu family already prepare a residence?" "That one is too far from Henjong." "So you changed it without asking me?" "No." He took out 2 drawings. One residence stood near the Gu clan school, the other was near Henjong. "You choose." The one near the clan school was larger and more respectable. The little residence near Hanzhong had only 2 courtyards, but it would save me about an hour of travel every day. Did the Gu elders agree? Eventually. How did you persuade them? I listed repair costs, servant costs, and carriage expenses for both properties. The one near Hanzong is cheaper. I could not help laughing. Headmaster Gu certainly knows how to discuss romance. If it works, it works. I chose the small residence. Not simply because it was close to Hanzhong, but because Gushin had not decided for me which kind of life was better. The day before the wedding, the women of the Eni cooperative brought me a patchwork quilt. Each had sewn one piece using the stitch she knew best. The colors did not entirely match, and some seams were neat while others were rough. Aunt Liu pointed at the crookedest patch. Miss Gu sewed that one. Gu Mingshu protested immediately. Knowing accounts does not mean I must know needlework. The whole courtyard burst into laughter. Zhang Sunyang handed me the quilt. Miss, at first all of us thought you had saved the shelter. Later we understood that you only opened a door. We still had to walk the road ourselves. I ran my hand over the imperfect quilt. I didn't save Hanzhong by myself either. Without all of you, it would only be an empty courtyard. Chuntao called from beside us. Miss, after you marry, you can't stop coming here. I'll come every day. What if Headmaster Gu is unhappy? Gu Shun's voice sounded from the doorway again. I can hear you. Everyone laughed even louder. On the wedding day, the sky was clear. I sat in my room without asking the time again and again as I had in my previous life. King Dai was more nervous than I was. Every few moments, she ran to the front courtyard for news. The Gu procession has reached the east side of the city. Then, they're at the street corner. Then, they're outside the gate. I looked toward the window. Sunlight came through the red paper decorations, warming the room. On the day of the proposal in my previous life, I had waited in the front hall until the red candles burned down. After marriage, I waited in room after cold room for Wen Xubai to return. Waiting had seemed to become my duty as a wife. In this life, Gushin arrived when he had promised. He was not late. He had even arrived about 8 minutes early. His voice came from outside the door. Chen Lingyi, even through the door, I could hear a trace of nervousness. I'm here. Qingdai smiled and lowered the bridal veil over me, but no one immediately rushed me out. Outside, Gushin unfolded the marital agreement we had revised together. Countless times he read every clause aloud. Each party retained ownership of property acquired before marriage. Shared expenses would be discussed according to income. Neither could dispose of the other's property without permission. If there was disagreement, neither could punish the other with silence. His voice paused briefly before the last line. For every promise made, neither shall make the other wait without end. My eyes suddenly burned. Not because it was some dazzling declaration of love, because the words landed exactly on the place that had hurt most in my previous life. I stood. I did not remain seated and wait for someone to come support me. I walked to the door and pushed it open myself. Guzun stood in the spring light, dressed in red. His features were as composed as ever, but the hand gripping the red ceremonial silk was visibly tense. I came early, he said. Do you want to wait a little longer? I smiled and placed my hand in his. No more waiting. Wedding music rose outside the courtyard. My father stood below the steps with a complicated expression, but he no longer used the family's reputation to persuade me how to choose. Gu Mingshu squeezed among the guests and waved wildly at me. Zhang Sunyang and Chuntao stood among the people. Hanzhong had sent to accompany the bride, smiling more brightly than anyone. As I crossed the threshold, I looked back once at the Chen residence where I had lived for 19 years. That year, I lost a marriage everyone thought respectable. It was also from that day that I took back the key my mother had left me, took back my property, and took back the right to decide my own life. Wen Xubai later left Yunzhou for an academy in another city. Some said he never married again. Others said that a few years later he married a widowed woman, and before their wedding he clearly explained every responsibility his household carried. I never investigated. His remaining life had finally become none of my concern. Su Wenlun stayed at Yunzhou Girls' School. We occasionally met because of orders and discussed business politely. We never spoke of Wen Xubai. She did not become my friend. But neither of us needed to fight anymore over the small measure of preference given by the same man. The Eni cooperative continued to encounter new problems every year. Some women learned skills and still chose to return to their husbands' families. Some had their wages swindled away. Some left the cooperative, failed in business, and returned asking for temporary work. I stopped trying to save every person. I only kept the door open. Inside were clear rules, wages that could be checked, and a roof that should shelter someone temporarily from wind and rain. Which road she took afterward was her decision. 3 years after our marriage, Hanzhong opened a second workshop in the south of the city. On opening day, Gushin came to me carrying the account book. The water wheel rent for the second workshop is not written clearly yet. I took the ledger. Headmaster Gu calculates this carefully even when doing business with his wife. Precisely because you are my wife, it should be written clearly. I added a breach of contract clause. After reading it, he wrote another line beside mine. If the proprietor is delayed by household responsibilities, the Gu clan may not charge a late fee. I looked up. What counts as household responsibilities? Helping the Gu family with its accounts. That would be your work. Then we share it. We began arguing over the clause. Outside the window, the looms sounded in steady rhythm. Workers in the courtyard were checking their own wages. Gu Mingshu had brought students to learn bookkeeping. Zhang Sunyang's new tailoring shop had already expanded into 2 storefronts, and that very day one of her apprentices had delivered a new sample garment. Life like this was not always sweet. There were accounts to calculate, mistakes to admit, and disagreements to argue through. But no one used silence to tell me that my needs were unimportant. No one asked me to prove my virtue through sacrifice, and no one made me spend long years waiting for an answer. Gusin noticed that I still had not put down the brush. What are you thinking about? I pushed the ledger toward him. That you were about 8 minutes late today. He glanced at the sunlight outside the window. The water wheel broke unexpectedly. Why didn't you send someone ahead to tell me? Next time, I'll write it down. He actually picked up the brush and wrote in the blank space on the account page. If delayed for any reason, advance notice must be given. I looked at his neat handwriting and laughed. He laughed too. Spring wind passed through the window and lifted one corner of the ledger. I reached out and held it down. In my previous life, I refused to let Wen Xubai take a concubine. He hated me for the rest of his life, and I was trapped in that marriage for the rest of mine. When I opened my eyes again on the day his family was to propose, he deliberately delayed bringing the betrothal gifts. This time, I did not wait. Only later did I understand that refusing to wait was not the end of the story, it was the beginning of my real life. Ayekdeza I et the izagau, I et diza iv, I nou the epet I et ow and et the u. Db hadido dupluon ro Elliot. In the 4th year of our marriage, Gusin fell ill. At first it was only a cough. When I returned from Hanzhong, he was still sitting in the study calculating the Gu clan's autumn harvest accounts. A cup of tea beside him had long gone cold. I stood at the doorway and listened for a while. For every 2 pages he turned, he lowered his head and coughed several times. Qingdai stood behind me and whispered, "Your husband has been like this since morning." He was urged to call a physician, but he said there were only 3 pages of accounts left and he would call one after he finished. I nodded and walked into the study. Gushin heard my steps and looked up. "You're back early today." I reached over and took the account book from in front of him. He paused. "There are only 2 pages left. See the physician first. It's only a cough. Who said last night that if a worker at Hanzhong is sick she must stop, and no one may operate a loom while ill just to earn more piecework pay?" Gusin was silent for a moment. "A loom is dangerous. Reading accounts too long while sick is dangerous too." "What danger?" "You may calculate them incorrectly." He looked ready to say that he would not calculate incorrectly, but before the words came out, he turned aside and began coughing again. I moved the ledger behind my back. "From this moment, you stop work for 3 days. There are Gu clan matters. Give them to the deputy steward. He is unfamiliar with several estates acquired this year. Then this is his chance to become familiar with them." Shun looked at me and finally realized there was no room to negotiate. "Chen Lingji, our marital agreement does not state that a wife may forcibly suspend her husband's work. We'll add it now." I pulled a sheet of paper from the table and wrote, "If either spouse is ill, the other has the right to suspend that person's work." Gushin rose and came to my side. After reading it, he picked up the brush and added, "Only after a physician confirms that the person is genuinely ill." I looked at him. "You're still trying to escape?" "I'm preventing one of us from pretending to be ill in the future." "Who would pretend to be ill?" "No one at present." He put the brush down. "Rules should consider the worst possible outcome." His face was already pale from illness, and he still remembered to amend clauses. A physician was soon summoned. After taking his pulse, the physician confirmed that Guzin had caught a chill and needed bed rest and medicine on schedule. I placed the prescription beside our new clause. "Can you stop working now?" Guzin glanced at the prescription. "Yes." He agreed so quickly that I became suspicious instead. Sure enough, when I returned from the Hanzhong accounts room after dark, the bed was empty. A thin line of lamplight showed beneath the study door. I pushed it open. Gushin sat at the desk in an outer robe. The final 2 pages of accounts lay open before him. Our eyes met for once. He displayed the stiff expression of someone caught in the act. "I was only confirming one figure. You were ordered to stop working for 3 days. I didn't put brush to paper. Reading accounts counts as work. Strictly speaking, it is only reading. I turned around. Gusun immediately set the ledger down. Where are you going? To get our marriage agreement. I returned with it and added another line beneath the new clause. During a work suspension, the affected party may not read, verify, dictate, or otherwise conduct official business in any form. Gusun frowned after reading it. That scope is too broad. How? If someone asks me about an urgent clan matter, I would not even be allowed to answer. You may answer, I don't know, but I do know. Then pretend you don't. That would be dishonest. I nearly laughed from frustration. Gusun, go back to bed immediately. I have not stamped the clause. It is effective whether you stamp it or not. A mutual agreement requires both parties' consent. He was infuriatingly correct, so I turned and called Gu Mingshu. She came in carrying a packet of candied fruit. Sister-in-law, why did you call me so late? I explained what had happened. Gu Mingshu immediately moved to stand beside me. I agree with sister-in-law. Gusun looked at her. This is a marital agreement. Then, as temporary administrator of Gu clan property, I also have the right to require the former administrator to rest. Gu Mingshu promptly produced the clan seal. By then she taught arithmetic at the girls' school and often assisted Gu Shun with clan property. She handles the seal with great confidence. In a few quick strokes, she wrote an official notice. Headmaster Gu Shun is suspended from duty for 3 days due to illness. During this period, he may not touch the account books. If he violates the suspension, the 3 days will restart. Then, she stamped it. Gusun stared at the bright red seal. His expression looked worse than when he was ill. Who authorized you to take temporary charge of clan property? Second granduncle. Gu Mingshu proudly pulled another document from her sleeve. They heard this afternoon that you were ill and were afraid you would insist on working. They already appointed me to manage things for 3 days. I could not hold back my laughter. Only then did Gu Shun understand that the entire Gu clan was guarding against his secret return to work. We finally escorted him back to his room to prevent another escape. I moved every account book out of the courtyard and had Qingdai keep watch at the door. The next morning, I brought in his medicine and found him sitting against the headboard reading a book. I reached out and took it. It was a travelogue. This is allowed. I handed it back. Gu Shun accepted it but did not open it. Chinlingyi. I'm idle. A rare experience. Is there anything at Hanjiang today? There is. Does the Gu clan have anything? I raised my eyes. He immediately corrected himself. I was only asking casually. After drinking the medicine, he still was not sleepy. In the end, he actually volunteered to organize my jewelry box. I considered it and decided that task was safe enough. About an hour later, when I returned, every hairpin, earring, and bracelet had been sorted into categories. Beside each lay a small note listing its material, origin, estimated value, and the last date I had worn it. I picked up a jade hairpin my mother had left me. Beside it he had written, precious, not recommended for pawning. Then I picked up a silver hairpin he had given me in the 2nd year of our marriage. Its note read, ordinary styles, worn infrequently by Madam Gift-Giver, expresses regret. I turned toward him. This is part of organizing an accurate record. You regret it? Since I gave it to you, I have seen you wear it only twice. I put the silver hairpin into my hair 3 times now. Gu Shun watched me for a moment. His expression finally softened. By the 3rd day, most of his cough had disappeared, but there was still 1 day left on his work suspension. That was because on the previous evening, while Qingdai went to fetch dinner, he had verbally instructed the deputy steward on how to calculate grain rent for one estate. Under Gu Mingshu's official notice, the suspension restarted. When Sun learned this, he was silent for a full quarter of an hour. I reminded him, you may not punish me with silence. He drew a deep breath. I am not punishing you. Then what are you thinking? I'm thinking of another clause. No household rule may be created through an alliance between you and Mingshu. That evening, Gu Mingshu and I unanimously voted against adding the clause. The first thing Gu Shun did after recovering was revise the Gu clan's sick leave rules. Every steward had to rest while ill. Anyone caught working during leave would have the leave extended. The entire Gu clan approved the change. Only Gu Shun himself, from then on, glanced around for me and Gu Mingshu every time he coughed. Unfortunately, he never escaped either of us. Iakte raete o raete wo, iapivao go hat te a rayan, edite oc. Ollic, tepe yanealteet eporobira o kai yanegura yanteet. In the 2nd year after Gu Shun and I married, we had a daughter. We named her Gu Zhening, with the childhood name in. Gu Shun originally prepared more than 20 possible names. Beside every one, he wrote its literary source, meaning, and whether it risked duplicating the name of a clan elder. After 2 pages, my head started to hurt. In the end, I took our daughter's soft little hand and let her press it down onto the page herself. Her handprint happened to land over the characters for Jining. Gushun stared at the tiny print and said this naming method was too careless. But he also could not deny that pressing a handprint was a clear form of choice, so the name was settled. Manmin began learning characters at 3. The first character Gu Mingshu taught her was person. The first character Gushun taught her was agreement. I was deeply dissatisfied. Other children begin with heaven, earth, sun, and moon. Why does our daughter begin with agreement? Gushun answered. She already knows the character for person. Once there is a person, one can make an agreement with that person. She will need it sooner or later. As it turned out, Gushun's teaching was extremely successful. By age 5, Manmin could already use crooked handwriting to draft simple agreements. At first, she only made deals with Gu Mingshu. If Auntie taught her 10 new characters, Manmin would keep secret the fact that Auntie had secretly eaten sweets. Later, she expanded to contracts with the Hanzhong workers. Man would watch a ball of thread for a quarter of an hour, and Sister Chuntao would give her 1 osmanthus cake. Eventually, she set her sights on her own parents. One day I returned from Hanzhong and saw a sheet of paper pasted to her bedroom door. It read knock before entering Manmin's room. Anyone who fails to knock owes 2 pieces of candy. I read it and thought it was good that the child was growing up and learning to protect her own space. So I knocked. Manmin, may mother come in? A childish voice answered from inside. Yeah, I pushed the door open. She was lying over the table, drawing an animal no one could identify. What are you drawing? A big goose. Why does it have 4 legs? So it can run fast. I decided to respect the child's imagination. When Gushun came home that evening, he did not know a new contract had appeared on the door. He pushed it open directly. Manmin immediately jumped down from her chair. Daddy didn't knock. Gushun stopped at the doorway. He read the paper. Who taught you to write this? Auntie. Gu Mingshu happened to be passing outside the courtyard. On hearing that, she immediately quickened her pace and hurried away. Manmin stretched out her little hand. Penalty, 2 candies. Shun asked with complete seriousness. Was I informed of this rule before it took effect? Manmin blinked. No. A contract requires the knowledge and consent of both parties. You pasted it on the door unilaterally. It is not binding on me. Manmin had clearly not expected her own father to debate legal principles with her. She froze for a long moment. Then her eyes began to turn red. I coughed once. Gushun looked at me. I reminded him. She is 5. Rules are unrelated to age. Manmin's mouth wobbled and tears fell. Gushun went rigid at once. He feared his daughter's tears more than anything. Unfortunately, Manmin discovered that very early. Whenever she could not win an argument with her father, she only needed to redden her eyes. Gushun knew perfectly well it was a tactic, and remained entirely helpless against it. He took a small bag of pine nut candy from his sleeve. Manmin immediately stopped crying and held up 2 fingers. 2. This isn't a breach penalty. It's compensation too. 1.5. The candies were tiny and impossible to divide neatly in half. Father and daughter negotiated over 1 or 2 candies for a long time. In the end, Manmin received 2 pieces, but she had to write a new room access agreement that every member of the family knew about. She happily fetched brush and paper. Clause 1. Knock before entering Manmin's room. Clause 2. Manmin must also knock before entering mother and father's room. When she saw the second clause, she began regretting the entire idea. Can Manmin not knock? No, Gushun said. A contract should be fair. Manmin chewed the brush handle and thought for a long time before adding except in emergencies. What counts as an emergency? I asked. Manmin is hungry. That does not count. Manmin misses mother. My heart softened halfway right then. Gushun remained firm. That does not count either. Manmin turned toward him. Manmin misses daddy. Gushun fell silent. I waited to see how strictly he would uphold his principles. After a while he picked up the brush and added for his daughter. A child's longing for her parents may be considered a special circumstance. I nearly spat out my tea laughing. Where are headmaster's principles now? Rules may contain exceptions. Who decides the exceptions? By mutual discussion. Manmin immediately hugged his leg. Daddy is the best. Gushun's expression stayed calm, but the tips of his ears visibly reddened. From then on, Manmin became addicted to writing contracts. She tried to sign an agreement with the kitchen requiring 1 sweet dish every day. I rejected it. She signed an agreement with Gu Mingshu stating that Auntie must never marry. Otherwise, Manmin would have no one to play with. Gu Mingshu not only stamped it, but demanded that Manmin also assume the cost of her sweets for the rest of her life. Manmin discovered the price was too high and tore up the contract on the spot. The most serious agreement she ever made was with Gushun. Daddy must return home at a set time every day. For every quarter of an hour he was late, he had to play with Manmin for an extra quarter of an hour. Gushun agreed. The first month he was never late. In the second month, one of the Gu clan's estates suddenly ran into trouble, and he returned home a full hour late. Manman sat on the threshold hugging a wooden abacus. Daddy is half an hour late. Gusun crouched in front of her. There was an urgent matter today. Manman opened the contract. It doesn't say urgent matters don't count. Gusun looked at his own signature and had nothing to say. That day, he spent about an hour playing a pretend weaving house game with her. Manman was the proprietor. I pretended to weave cloth. Gusun had to pay rent. He handed several copper coins to his daughter. Manman counted them and said with a stern little face, "Not enough. It is enough. The water wheel broke, it needs repair. The renter should not bear the entire cost of repairing the water wheel." "Yes, the contract does not say so." Manman looked at me. I lowered my head and went on weaving my imaginary cloth, with no intention of getting involved. Father and daughter argued for a long time. At last Gusun proposed sharing the repair cost. Manman thought carefully and nodded. "Okay, but Daddy must give Manman one candy." "Why?" "Because Manman is hungry. That has nothing to do with the water wheel. Missing Daddy is a special circumstance." Gusun finally understood that the exception he had written himself would be used against him for the rest of his life. When Manman was 7, she could already help Hanjong check the simplest quantities. Once, she discovered that Chuntao had shipped 2 cloth bags too few. Chuntao exclaimed, "Little proprietor is amazing." Manman corrected her immediately. "I'm not a little proprietor. Hanjong belongs to everyone." That sentence made me stand still for a long time. Gusun stroked her head. After returning home, he took out the first agreement Manman had written at age 5. The paper was so wrinkled it was almost shapeless. Yet he had kept it all this time. I asked him, "Headmaster Gu, do you regret teaching her to write contracts so early?" Gusun watched our daughter in the courtyard, chasing Gu Mingshu and demanding candy. "Sometimes." "Why? She is now harder to negotiate with than you are." Manman's hearing was excellent. She immediately ran in from the courtyard. Daddy said did not change expression. Gusun did not. Manman heard it. I was only describing negotiation difficulty. Penalty 2 candies. Gusun closed his eyes briefly. I leaned against the doorway, laughing so hard I could barely stop. In the end, he still gave her 2 candies. One was the breach penalty. The other was special compensation because he missed his daughter. I ikde raete ero, gauzdap liu oul, dbeconcubineate, et had el epbe kaite oep gar, ionet a dfi. In the 5th year of our marriage, word suddenly spread through Yunzhou. Guz was going to take a concubine. The news reached Hanjong while I was inspecting a new batch of cloth. Chuntao rushed in so quickly she nearly tripped over the threshold. "Proprietor, something terrible happened." I put down the cloth. "Did the water wheel break again?" "Worse than that. The dye pond is leaking? Your husband is taking a concubine." The clatter of the looms stopped instantly. Jiangsun nearly dropped her scissors. Gu Mingshu was teaching the new female workers bookkeeping at the news. The charcoal stick in her hand snapped. "My elder brother is taking a concubine?" Chuntao nodded vigorously. Auntie Zhou, the vegetable seller in the east of the city, heard it with her own ears. A Gu said the newcomer has already been brought into the residence. Everyone turned to me. I was very calm. "Where is Gusun today?" "At the Gu clan fields." "He should return this evening." Gu Mingshu rolled up her sleeves. "Sister-in-law, I'll go home right now and investigate for you." I stopped her. "No need. You're not angry?" "Before I get angry, I should ask what actually happened." Gu Mingshu was furious. "What is there to ask? He wrote with his own hand that he would not take a concubine. Now he dares break the agreement." She pulled the post-marriage agreement Jusun and I had signed out of a cabinet. There it was in black ink with fingerprints beneath it. Chuntao was furious too. "Proprietor, don't worry, we're all on your side. If your husband truly has that kind of nerve, let him move out with his newcomer." Zhang Sunyang remained calm. "Is the residence in the Gu family's name or the proprietor's?" "The one near Hanzang was purchased jointly after the marriage." She immediately said, "Then each of you owns half. You cannot let him take the whole house." Everyone had already started dividing our marital property for me. The more they discussed it, the more I felt something was wrong. If Gusun truly intended to take a concubine, he would never let Auntie Zhou, who sold vegetables, hear about it before I did. Besides, he was so busy every day that I had to force him to rest. Where would he find time to support another person? Go back to work. I picked up the cloth again. No one moved. They all looked at me as though I were forcing myself to suppress grief. Gu Mingshu's eyes even reddened. "Sister-in-law, you don't need to pretend to be strong in front of us. Wen Xubai betraying you was bad enough. How could my brother also Gu Mingshu? He is still your biological elder brother. From the moment he decided to take a concubine temporarily, he isn't. I sighed. By afternoon, the rumor had become increasingly detailed. Some said the newcomer had skin as white as snow and a delicate temperament. Some said Gu Shun personally arranged her living quarters and ordered the kitchen to prepare the freshest tender greens. Someone else claimed that the newcomer had barely entered the residence before biting a chunk out of Headmaster Gu's favorite account book. When I heard the last detail, I finally became certain the so-called newcomer was probably not human. Sure enough, when I returned home that evening, I found a large snow-white goose in the back courtyard. He stood inside a bamboo enclosure, long-necked and loud-voiced, lowering his head to chew the corner of an account book. Gu Shun stood nearby with a grim expression. Manman crouched outside the enclosure holding a handful of greens. Daddy Xubai is hungry again. At the name Xubai, the goose raised its head and honked. I stopped at the courtyard entrance. So this is the concubine you're taking? Gu Shun whipped around. What? Behind me came Gu Mingshu, Chun Tao and Zhang Sunyang. They had insisted on accompanying me home, so I would not have to face an unfaithful husband alone. The three of them saw the goose and fell completely silent. Gu Shun clearly had not heard the rumor, I explained. His expression shifted from confusion to livid anger. Who said I am taking a concubine? Mammon raised her hand. Hi, Uncle Steward, why would he say that? Daddy said to bring Xubai into the rear courtyard. Gu Shun closed his eyes. I said bring him into the rear courtyard, not bring a concubine into the rear courtyard. What had happened was simple. A large white goose had been caught eating vegetable seedlings on a Gu clan farm. The tenants originally planned to slaughter him. Manman thought he was beautiful. She hugged Gu Shun's leg and cried for half a day, insisting on bringing him home. Gu Shun refused. Manman then produced the clause stating that a child's longing for her parents could count as a special circumstance, and declared that if she lost Xubai, she would miss him terribly. In the end, Gu Shun could only tell the steward to bring the goose into the rear courtyard. The steward spoke with a heavy accent. Auntie Jo happened to hear only half the sentence. So within half a day, the news that Headmaster Gu was bringing in a concubine spread throughout Yunzhou. Gu Mingzhu covered her face. I almost broke with my own elder brother over a goose, Chun Tao said quietly, mostly because your husband is usually so serious. Hearing that he suddenly took a concubine sounded especially shocking. Gu Shun looked at her. Chun Tao immediately hid behind Zhang Suning. I walked to the bamboo enclosure. Why is Xubai biting your account book? Manman said. Daddy won't give him greens. He has already eaten half a basket. Gu Shun pointed at the empty bamboo basket beside them. Those were the first spring vegetables delivered from the Gu clan farm. As though he understood, the goose lowered his head and bit the ledger again. Gu Shun yanked it away. A corner was already missing. I could not hold back my laughter. Headmaster Gu, this newcomer has quite an appetite. He goes back to the farm tomorrow. No! Manman immediately wrapped her arms around his leg. Xubai began honking loudly from the enclosure. One child and one goose cooperated perfectly. Gu Shun looked down at his daughter. Today he ate half a basket of greens, bit one account book, and left 17 messes in the courtyard. Manman tried to negotiate. Manman will feed him from now on. You cannot get up in the morning. Manman can. Yesterday you had to be called 3 times. That was yesterday. Gu Shun did not soften. Back to the farm. Manman's eyes reddened. That tactic had never failed before. This time, Goons turned his face away and refused to look at her. He was probably genuinely furious about the account book. Manman realized crying would not work. She immediately ran back to her room. A moment later, she returned holding a new agreement. Clause 1. Manman and Xubai make an agreement. Gu Shun took it and read. The agreement was very detailed. First, Xubai may eat no more than 1 basket of greens each day. Second, Xubai may not bite account books. Third, the waste Xubai leaves behind will be cleaned by Manman and the maid together. Fourth, if Xubai breaks the rules again, he will be sent back to the farm. June pointed at the first clause. 1 basket is too much. Half a basket. Still too much. They settled on a smaller amount. Then he pointed to the third clause. You may not assign your own responsibility to the maid, Manman pouted. Manman doesn't know how to sweep. You can learn. Father and daughter revised the agreement on the spot. In the end, Xubai successfully won a 1-month trial stay in the rear courtyard. Gu Shun required that the goose's food, cleaning, and any damage he caused be recorded separately. Manman was responsible for checking the account. The next day at Hanzhong, when everyone learned that Headmaster Gu's rumored concubine was a goose, the laughter did not stop all day. Chuntao even used scraps of cloth to make Xubai a red flower for his neck. When Gu Shun came home and saw him, his expression became even worse. Take it off, Manman protected the goose. Why Xubai is getting married? Standing beside them, I said. The whole city already knows about Headmaster Gu's new concubine. Surely there should be some ceremony for bringing the newcomer into the household. Gu? Shin looked at me. You're enjoying this? A little. I stroked Xiaobai's feathers. At least this newcomer will not expect me to support him. The moment I finished speaking, Xiaobai stretched out his neck and snatched the account slip in my hand. Gusun and I grabbed for it at the same time. The paper tore neatly in two. The courtyard went silent for a breath. Gusun slowly looked at me. He won't expect you to support him. Holding half the slip, I silently revised my conclusion. It appears further observation is required. A month later, Xiaobai was not sent back to the farm. Although he loved eating, loved honking, and had bitten account books, he turned out to be unexpectedly good at guarding the courtyard. Whenever a stranger entered the rear yard, Xiaobai chased the person immediately. Once, when Wen Xubai happened to come to Yunzhou to deliver a girls' school reading list, Xiaobai chased him from our doorway all the way to the end of the street. Manman proudly announced, "Xiaobai protects mother." Gushin stood by the door and, for once, approved. That can offset part of the loss. From then on, Hanzhong had a large white goose. He patrolled the courtyard every day, occasionally chasing workers who tried to slack off, and became the most imposing supervisor in the entire weaving house. The only problem was that whenever people in the city saw him, they still laughed and asked, "So this is the new one Headmaster Gu brought into the household?" At first, Gu Shin still tried to explain. Later he discovered that the more he explained, the harder people laughed, so he simply stopped speaking. I reminded him, "You are not allowed to punish people with silence." He replied expressionlessly, "I am not punishing anyone. I only regret that I did not make the distinction between bring in and take in as a concubine clear enough at the time." Xiaobai honked beside him. Manman immediately translated, "Xiaobai says to write it down next time." Gushin looked at his daughter and then at the goose capable of eating a basket of greens in a single day. At last he took paper and brush from his sleeve and drafted a formal residence agreement for a goose. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. I had been on my way to refuse the marriage when I heard Su Wenyu's clear voice from inside. "Today I have come to ask for eldest young lady Chen's hand in marriage. I hope uncle and aunt will give us your blessing." I stopped short, then hurried into the main hall. Su Wenyu was standing with his back to me. Hearing my footsteps, he slowly turned. His gaze passed over my face, then shifted behind me and stopped on elder sister. "Eldest young lady Chen, I am willing to take responsibility for what happened last night and make amends to you." My heart lurched. In my previous life, the woman he had come to ask for in marriage had clearly been me. Why in this life had he asked for elder sister the moment he opened his mouth? Could he have returned too? Elder sister's face went white. She bit her lip, flicked a quick glance at me, and immediately looked away. "I am afraid young Lord Su has mistaken me for someone else. You and Susu have known each other for years and even studied at the same academy. I have never had any personal dealings with you. I cannot accept such amends from you." Su Wenyu shook his head, his expression firm. "Susu and I were only fellow students. There was never anything else between us. At last night's palace banquet, I was unfortunately drugged, but I did not completely lose my senses. I know who was with me." I could not have mistaken her. Father, seated at the head of the hall, frowned. "The palace banquet? What exactly happened yesterday?" Elder sister burst into tears and threw herself into mother's arms. Her shoulders trembled and her words came out broken. "Mother, I do not know either. When I woke up, my clothes were already in disarray." She bit her lip as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Susazu has admired young Lord Su for so long. How could I compete with her?" My chest tightened, and I hurried forward. "Elder sister, young Lord Su and I have no secret understanding. If he truly behaved improperly toward you, then he should take responsibility for it." Su Wenyu turned and looked deeply at me. The emotion in his eyes was impossible to read. After a long moment, he said quietly, "Susu is right. I am willing to take responsibility." Mother took elder sister into the inner room, shut the door and questioned her in a low voice. When she came out a while later, her eyes were slightly red. In the end, she nodded and agreed to the marriage. Su Wenju visibly relaxed and prepared to leave. Yet when he reached the corridor, he stopped and turned back to me with an apologetic look. "Susu, I have always regarded you only as a younger sister. Do not misunderstand." I stepped back half a pace and forced a smile. "You are right, young Lord Su. I have only regarded you as an elder brother as well." He looked faintly puzzled, but the expression vanished almost at once. As I watched his back disappear, memories from my previous life rose before me. For a time I had disguised myself as a boy and studied at Xiangshan Academy. Su Wenyu thought I was small and delicate for a young man, so he treated me like a younger schoolmate and often looked after me. His features were gentle, and when he smiled, it felt like a spring breeze brushing past. Falling for someone like him had seemed the most natural thing in the world. On the day I left the academy, I took the initiative to reveal that I was a woman. He froze for a moment, the tips of his ears turning red, then solemnly promised that once we both returned home, he would send a matchmaker to the Chen residence. But before that matchmaker ever crossed our threshold, something happened to him at a palace banquet. I heard he had been drugged and had an intimate encounter with someone. By coincidence, I had been drugged that night too. The next day, Su Wenyu came to the Chen household and asked to marry me. After we married, elder sister also hurried into a marriage with the young lord of a duke's household. Yet on the very night of her wedding, she was driven from the bridal chamber because her husband discovered that her chastity had already been compromised. When Su Wenyu learned of it, he coldly warned me not to keep associating with elder sister. He said her conduct was disgraceful and would stain my reputation. For the next 3 years, elder sister lived miserably. I often hid it from Su Wenyu and from our parents, while quietly sending her money and helping her however I could. I ran everywhere on her behalf until, at last, I helped her leave that marriage with her child and return home. The day she came back, Su Wenyu and I happened to be visiting my parents. The moment he saw the child beside her, Huaiyan, his whole body stiffened, and his expression changed sharply. From then on, his attitude toward elder sister grew gentler by the day. I assumed that, because he was my husband and cared for me, he had decided to show more consideration toward my family as well. But I never imagined that when Huaiyan and my son, Jinchuan, fell into the water at the same time, Su Wenyu would not hesitate for even a heartbeat. He rushed straight toward Huaiyan. By the time Jinchuan was pulled out, he had been underwater too long. He burned with fever for 3 days. After the fever broke, he became withdrawn and lost the ability to speak. When Su Wenyu lay dying, he held my hand with reddened eyes. His voice was thin and weak. That year at the palace banquet, I was drugged. My mind was clouded, and I thought the person beside me was hers. That was why I went to your house to propose. If I could live my life again, I would only want to marry Alan and give her the explanation she deserved. I would not let her suffer so much again. I had listened in a daze, my ears ringing. If the person with him that night had been elder sister, then who had been with me? That night at the palace banquet, I had been drugged too. When I woke, I was alone in a side hall, my clothes disordered. Now after Su Wenyu left our house, elder sister came to see me. She stood outside my door for a long time before finally pushing it open. Susu, that night at the palace banquet, I had a few too many cups and went into the garden for some air. My head was already hazy when young Lord Su. Her ears turned scarlet, and her eyes darted away. He mistook me for you. I lowered my eyes and sighed inwardly. Elder sister and I bore a noticeable resemblance, with about half our features similar, and our builds were not very different. Under the moonlight in the garden, with Su Wenyu's mind clouded by the drug, it was not entirely impossible for him to have mistaken one of us for the other. But perhaps this was for the best. If in this life Su Wenyu was willing to take responsibility and openly marry her, then I was happy to see the two of them finally become husband and wife. Still, I could not help remembering something from my previous life. I had heard that the drug Su Wenyu took that night was extremely potent and had damaged his health. In 3 years of marriage, he and I had only had one child, Jinchuan. Everyone said we simply were not destined to have many children, and I had never thought much about it. But if the person with Su Wenyu that night truly had been elder sister, then Jinchuan could not have been his child at all. He had unknowingly raised another man's son for years. In that respect, I had wronged him. I lifted my eyes, smiled, and took elder sister's hand. Do not overthink it. Did young Lord Su not say so himself? He has only ever regarded me as a younger sister. Only then did the tightness between her brows ease. The guilt in her eyes slowly faded, replaced by quiet happiness. Su Wenyu acted decisively. The very next day, he brought a formal matchmaker to our door. They went through every one of the traditional betrothal rites, and he became officially engaged to elder sister. Their wedding was set for 2 months later, on a clear, cool autumn day. During those weeks, I often saw elder sister and Su Wenyu going out together. He walked with her through cosmetic shops, helped her choose hair ornaments, and showed endless patience. His expression was always gentle. Whenever he happened to see me, however, he instinctively turned his face away, or chose another path, probably to avoid impropriety. I understood the hint. Every time he visited, I found some excuse to go out and left the two of them alone. One afternoon, my carriage had just left a shop when, at a bend in the street, it met another carriage coming from the opposite direction. The road was narrow. Neither side was willing to reverse, so the two vehicles simply jammed the street. I lifted my curtain and looked out. At the same moment, a long-fingered hand raised the opposite curtain, revealing a face I knew far too well. Wen Xubai, Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, had been my sworn enemy since childhood. The twisted fate between us went back years. When we were little, he once invited me to pick lotus seeds. The boat overturned, and I nearly drowned in the lotus pond. He struggled from the bank for nearly half a day before finally hauling me out. Later, he tempted me into going after honey with him. He snatched up the jar of honey and ran faster than a rabbit, while I was chased by an entire swarm of bees. My head was covered in stings and stayed swollen for half a month. After that, I learned my lesson. Whenever Wen Xubai invited me anywhere, I reported myself ill without exception. But avoiding him completely was impossible. The capital was only so large. Sooner or later, our paths always crossed. The moment he saw me, Wen Xubai frowned, his tone unfriendly. "Chen Susu, move your carriage back." I sat up straight and answered loudly and confidently, "I will not." Standing my ground feels satisfying. Backing down would only leave me frustrated. Wen Xubai choked on his words. Then he threw aside his curtain, jumped down from his carriage and strode to my window. He tapped a finger against the frame and lowered his voice. "Chen Susu, you clearly said that the next time you saw me you would speak to me properly. You never keep your word." I tilted my head. "When did I say that? Do not treat something from a dream as though it happened in real life." He glared at me, yet the tips of his ears gradually turned red. I could not help laughing. So it really had been a dream. If the me in your dream agreed to something, what does that have to do with the real me? Wen Xubai became so angry that his pointing finger trembled. You are impossible." I was about to retort when my gaze suddenly stopped. His collar had shifted slightly. Along the side of his neck were several faint red marks that looked like scratches. Wen Xubai noticed where I was looking and instantly covered his neck. His entire face flushed red. My curiosity surged. Now this was interesting. Who had been bold enough to provoke him? As Vice Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, if Wen Xubai was not chasing criminals, he was conducting post-mortem examinations in criminal cases. A cold, forbidding air always clung to him, mixed with the scent of pine wood and a faint metallic trace of blood. In his eyes, I suspected, an unidentified body by the roadside might be more appealing than any living person. Yet someone had actually managed to leave scratches on his neck? Under my stare, he grew visibly uncomfortable. He glared at me, pulled a banknote from inside his robe, and shoved it through the carriage window before I could refuse. "One tail, let me pass first. I have urgent business." This miser was finally willing to part with some money. I took the banknote and was about to tell my coachman to reverse when my raised hand suddenly froze. No, I absolutely could not back up today. I remembered this day with perfect clarity. In my previous life, Wen Xubai had encountered a band of violent robbers while carrying out official business. A blade pierced his chest and fatally injured his heart and lungs. By the time he was carried back to the Court of Judicial Review, his body had already gone cold. When I heard the news in that life, I had been airing books in the courtyard. The volume in my hand dropped to the ground with a thud. I stood there dazed for the time it took to drink a cup of tea. I had always thought the two of us would keep quarreling for the rest of our lives, until our hair turned white, until we needed walking sticks, still glaring at each other and trading insults. I never imagined he would suddenly disappear. After that, there was no one left who could match me word for word, every bit my equal. The capital was enormous, but there was no second Wen Xubai, no one else who could make me stamp my feet in fury and yet stay in my memory to this day. I threw the banknote straight back at him and lifted my chin. Today I refused to back up. Wen Xubai spun once in place from sheer frustration, then turned and glared at me again. "Chen Susu, are you moving or not?" "No." He drew 2 hard breaths, then unexpectedly stopped arguing. Gathering up the hem of his robe, he moved to the front of my carriage and actually tried to lift the shafts and push the entire thing backward himself. How could I let him be so unreasonable? I immediately flung up the curtain, leaned out, grabbed the back of his collar, and yanked him directly into the carriage. Caught off guard, he stumbled inside. The two of us immediately grappled in the cramped carriage, trading wild punches and kicks, neither willing to let go first. By the time we were both exhausted and had retreated to opposite sides, breathing hard, I discovered a neat circle of my teeth marks on his face, bright red and impossible to miss. Wen Xubai touched his cheek. The moment his fingertips found the marks, his whole body stiffened and his eyes reddened. "You have made my face look like this. How am I supposed to go on official business?" He pointed at his cheek, then tugged his collar aside enough to show the scratches on his neck. His voice trembled with anger. "My neck is like this, and now my face too. Chen Susu, were you born in the year of the dog or what?" Leaning against the carriage wall, I smoothed my disordered hair and said lazily, "Do not blame the marks on your neck on me. Since you cannot go out looking like that anyway, go home and rest. Stop running around showing yourself off." He pointed at me until even his knuckles shook. "Fine, you win. I really should never have believed your nonsense. You said you would treat me well from now on. It was all a lie." For some reason, my heart gave one sudden hard beat. I quickly turned my face away. "Stop using something from a dream to deceive me." Rongxi snorted and said no more. He lifted the curtain, jumped down, and ordered his coachman to reverse. His carriage then turned and left. Idiot. I had just saved his life. After buying some pastries, I went home. The moment my carriage stopped outside the Chen residence, I saw elder sister and Su Wenyu standing on the steps saying goodbye. Suddenly, elder sister swayed. Su Wenyu reacted quickly and caught her by the arm. Both of them flushed. Their gazes met for an instant, then darted away. When she saw my carriage, elder sister immediately withdrew her arm and stepped back twice. I climbed down. Su Wenyu's eyes instantly fell on my face. He stared at the split at the corner of my mouth, brows tightening. For some reason his expression darkened, then went pale. Elder sister saw it too. She hurried over, lifted my face in both hands and examined me anxiously. "Susu, where did you go? What happened to your mouth?" Only then did I slowly touch the corner of my lips. I hissed softly at the pain. During the scuffle, I had been too busy fighting to notice, but now I realized the skin was broken and had swollen into a small bump. To be fair, I could not blame myself entirely. When I bit Rongsi's cheek, he was hardly the sort to accept defeat quietly. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but in the end he did not dare bite my face. Afraid I would hold a grudge, he turned and bit the corner of my mouth instead. The instant he did it, he froze first. Then he retreated into the corner of the carriage, looking anywhere but at me. I answered lazily, "A dog bit me by accident." Elder sister stared. "A dog? Then that could be serious. We should call a physician so the wound does not become infected." Beside her, Su Wenyu gave a cold laugh. His eyes moved slowly from my injured lip to my face, his words sharp. "I am afraid it was not a dog but a person." "Alan, you said Susu disappeared for a while during the palace banquet too. Could someone have plotted against her, or did she deliberately go to meet a man in private?" My fingertips went cold. I suddenly remembered my wedding night in the previous life. At that time, I had not been a virgin. What Su Wenyu had just implied was obvious. He suspected that in our previous life I had been involved with another man and then let him bear the blame. Damn it. Was I not innocent too? He had personally come to my house and repeatedly said he was willing to take responsibility. That was why I believed he had been the man from that night and agreed to marry him. From beginning to end, I had never knowingly deceived him. Elder sister spoke up for me. "Young Lord Susu is not that kind of person. You studied with her for years. You should know her character." Su Wenyu merely curled his lip faintly. "It is precisely because we studied together for years that I know how reckless she can be. At the academy, she and young Master Rong were forever exchanging flirtatious glances, coming and going together, practically inseparable. I saw it with my own eyes. How could that be false?" My heart sank. Rongxi and I had been close at the academy, only because he was the one person there who knew I was a woman. Every day I lived in fear that he would accidentally expose me, so he used that weakness to order me around as he pleased. He would buy pastries, insist he could not finish them, and force me to eat every last piece until I was too full to sleep. Once, he complained that he had no one to fly a kite with and dragged me up the mountain. The kite became caught in a tree. He stubbornly climbed up to retrieve it, slipped and fell directly onto me. I landed hard on a sharp rock and injured my backside badly enough to bleed, bursting into tears from the pain. He went white with panic and carried me down the mountain at a run to find a physician. He even lost one shoe and did not dare stop to pick it up. That was how we had spent those years, making trouble together, but never once crossing an improper line. Elder sister seemed to remember those things too, and gently defended me. Young Master Rong and Susu have known each other since childhood. They may be somewhat more familiar than most men and women, but they would never overstep propriety. What happened at the academy was probably a misunderstanding. Su Wenyu stubbornly looked away. "Alan, do not assume Susu can do no wrong merely because she is your younger sister. If she truly respected you as her elder sister, she would not steal what belongs to you." My fist tightened sharply. Was he saying I had stolen him? Absurd. Did he have any idea what his supposedly wonderful mother had made up about me, behind my back in my previous life? On our wedding night, after he lifted my bridal veil, he silently walked out. For the next 3 years we slept in separate rooms. At first I assumed the palace banquet had left a shadow on his heart, so I yielded to him again and again, cared for him attentively, and hoped time would help him let go. Then one day I passed his study by chance and heard his mother speaking in a low voice. "Your body is already like this. Fortunately there is still Jinxuan." She sighed. "But in the end, there is only one grandson. One grandson is still too few." Su Wenyu was silent for a moment before answering. "Jinxuan is enough." His mother gave a cold laugh. "It is all Chensusu's fault for being so promiscuous. She was far too demanding that night and ruined your health." I stood outside the door, cold from head to toe. So in the eyes of mother and son, I was the one who had damaged him. From that point on, his mother became even harsher toward me. She made me copy scriptures, drilled me in rules, and found fault with me at every turn. At first Su Wenyu occasionally spoke a few words on my behalf. Later, he merely said softly, "Mother only wants what is best for you. Just listen to her." He did not treat me cruelly, but in the end he always chose obedience to his mother over defending me. I laughed coldly. "Rest assured, young Lord Su. I have never stolen anything from elder sister, and there is no need for you to worry." I paused and looked him over. "I, Chensusu, do not pick up just any piece of trash." Su Wenyu's face went livid. After a long while, he managed only one word, "you," before losing the rest of the sentence. I could not be bothered to look at him again and went straight inside. That night, mother came to my room and sat beside my bed talking for a long time. Elder sister's marriage was already settled, both families were completing the formal rites, and naturally mother brought up my own future. "You are not young anymore. I was thinking of looking at a few suitable households for you." But my thoughts were still on what had happened that day. Had that fool Rongxi escaped the disaster that killed him in my previous life? While I was distracted, mother suddenly remembered something. "That reminds me. Young Master Rong ran into robbers today and nearly lost his life. Fortunately, his guards arrived in time." I sat bolt upright. "Is he all right?" I heard his arm was injured. "Nothing else seems serious." The weight on my chest finally lifted. I let out a slow breath. Good. Delaying him for a while had worked. Otherwise, he might have lost his life on that road again. Mother saw that I had ignored everything she had said about marriage, and was sitting there with a foolish little smile on my face. She shook her head with a sigh. "Forget it. I will talk to you tomorrow." She rose, closed the door behind her, and left. The next morning, I deliberately took my time walking to the Rong residence with a large parcel of braised pork trotters. I was visiting an injured man after all, bringing food counted as thoughtfulness. I reached Rongxi's courtyard and, without waiting to be announced, pushed open his door. He was sitting by the bed with his upper body bare while a physician changed the dressing on his arm. Slanting sunlight fell through the window, revealing a sharply defined 8-pack. 2 conspicuous red marks stood out on his chest. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. Who had been bold enough to leave those behind? At the sound of the door, Rongxi jerked his head up. The instant he saw me, his entire face went red to the ears. He hurriedly pulled his inner robe around himself and fumbled with the ties. "Chensusu, why did you not have someone announce you before barging in?" I knew I was in the wrong, but I answered with great confidence anyway. "You never cared about such things before." He was embarrassed and furious at once. "Before was before, now is now. You keep taking liberties with me for no reason." I scratched my head, genuinely puzzled. Had the robber's blade grazed his head after all? Why had he suddenly become so shy? And what did he mean by keep? Suppressing my questions, I placed the package of trotters on the table and patted the paper wrapping. "Here. They say eating a certain part helps strengthen the same part. I brought these to help you recover." Rongxi stared at the mountain of trotters, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Who needs this many? Are you here to present betrothal gifts?" I nearly choked on my own saliva. What family uses pork trotters as betrothal gifts? Besides, you are a year younger than I am. When we were little, you looked more like a girl than I did. What would I be marrying you for? To bring you home as an elder sister? I folded my arms. You were the one who once said that even if you could never find a wife, you would never consider Chensusu. Rongxi abruptly stood. He crossed the room in a few steps and stopped directly in front of me, glaring down. Yet at some point his eyes had turned red. I regret saying it. Am I not allowed to regret it? I rose onto my toes and met his stare without yielding. Regret is useless. I plan to have a husband marry into my household. His whole body stiffened. His eyes reddened even more, and he looked inexplicably wounded. So that is your plan to bring a husband into your household. I felt strangely guilty under that aggrieved expression and quickly looked away, clearing my throat to change the subject. Ahem. If I had not blocked your road yesterday, you might have died under a robber's blade. Should you not hurry up and thank me? He watched me for a long moment before asking hoarsely, with obvious reluctance, how do you want me to thank you? By offering myself in return. My heart jumped. I hurriedly rubbed my hands together and put on a shameless grin. If the younger brother owes the debt, why not let the elder brother repay it? I heard your elder brother has returned. Why not make it up to me by letting me have your elder brother instead? Rongxi drove me out together with my entire parcel of pork trotters. He stood inside the doorway, one hand braced on the frame and the other pointing at me, his chest rising and falling with fury. Chen Susu, you have no heart. It is bad enough that you have your eye on me. Now you have your eye on my elder brother too. Before he had even finished, Madame Rong leaned halfway out from inside. She had apparently come to mediate, but the moment she heard those words, her eyes lit up. She shoved Rongxi aside and cheerfully took my hand. Susu, which one do you actually like, Aze or Asi? I have 2 sons. Pick whichever you want. Rongxi nearly fainted from anger. Mother, have you ever once considered me? Madame Rong did not even turn around. How have I not considered you? I put you on the list for her to choose from, did I not? He clutched his chest, his expression shifting between fury and disbelief. So furious he looked ready to cough up blood. Then he pulled something from his sleeve and shoved it hard into my palm. Chen Susu, very good. I waited for you for so long, and all this time you only had eyes for my elder brother. You treated me as a substitute. For once he looked genuinely furious. I might as well disappear from your sight for good. He slammed the door shut. From inside came Madame Rong's muffled shout. If you insist on making a scene, do it outside the house, followed immediately by a burst of chaos. I lowered my head and looked at my hand. A twinfish jade pendant lay in my palm. Was that not the very pendant I had searched everywhere for? I remembered clearly that it disappeared on the night of the palace banquet. When I woke the next morning, my neck was bare. Afraid the missing pendant might become a clue that exposed what had happened, I searched every inch of the side hall and still could not find it. Wait, where had Rongxi been that night? A chill crept up my spine. A blurred fragment of memory suddenly flashed through my mind. Dim lamplight, disordered bedding. Through the haze, I remembered Rongxi in distress while I was too drugged to understand the situation clearly. Still dazed from the drug, I had reached out and scratched him once in irritation, then told him to stop crying. And then, stop crying, fine, I will take responsibility. I will come to your house and propose afterward. That voice, that figure. Those wet, accusing eyes staring at me. Rongxi, the case was solved. The person with me that night had been Rongxi, so I had been the one who wronged Rongxi that night. No wonder, in my previous life, only Su Wenyu had come to the Chen household to propose. The man who truly should have come had died beneath the robber's blades before he ever got the chance. And no wonder I had always thought there was something strangely familiar about Jinchuan's features, yet I could never find anyone in the Su family who resembled him. He resembled Rongxi. My legs went weak and my heart began pounding wildly. Rongxi truly was better looking than Su Wenyu. His eyes were deep set, his nose straight, and when he smiled, shallow dimples appeared in his cheeks. But he had never given me a pleasant expression. Every time we met, he either mocked me or avoided me. He had been that way since childhood. I walked home thinking the entire way. I had always assumed he disliked me, yet his behavior just now clearly suggested otherwise. With a head full of tangled thoughts, I sat by my window in a daze. After a long time without reaching any conclusion, I simply went back to the Rong residence and climbed over the wall into Rongxi's courtyard. I knew the way well. When I reached his room and was about to push open the door, I heard muffled sobbing from inside. My steps stopped. Was he crying? A hoarse shout suddenly came from the room. Get out! Did I not say I do not need anyone serving me? I pushed the door open anyway. Rongxi was curled inside his quilt, with only his swollen, reddened eyes showing. The moment he saw me, he panicked and hurriedly wiped away his tears. I walked to the bedside, considered my words, and finally said, about that? I had forgotten that you were the person from that night. Stop crying. If it comes to that, I will take responsibility. Rongxi threw aside the quilt and sat up. The corners of his eyes were still wet and red. Why did you come back? I touched my nose awkwardly. Then I will leave. He immediately grabbed my hand. Were you serious when you said you would take responsibility? I looked at his damp eyes and my heart softened at once. He looked far too much like an abandoned puppy. Yes. I was serious. He was already in such a desperate state. How could I simply ignore him? Besides, after Rongxi died in my previous life, I thought of him every few days and felt a dull ache in my chest. Later, for reasons I never understood, I even developed a heart ailment. If he died again in this life and I developed the same illness, what would I do then? Rongxi stared at me for a long time. The grip on my hands slowly loosened. He lowered his eyes and muttered gloomily, "You are lying to me. The one you like is my elder brother. You only treat me as a substitute." I fell silent. Where had that idea come from? Rongze was graceful and refined, cool and distant, the kind of man almost anyone would admire at first sight. He was gentle and courteous to everyone. His manners measured to perfection. One could stand close to him, but never seemed to enter his heart. He felt as distant as the moon, easy to admire, impossible to hold. I shook my head honestly. You and your elder brother are nothing alike. He is better looking than you. Even if you wanted to be his substitute, you could not manage it. Rongxi went silent. His expression shifted from anger to wounded disbelief, and then he burst into tears again. "Chen Susu, you are remarkable. You have broken my heart clean through." I coaxed him for nearly 2 hours before he finally stopped crying. After we agreed on the day his family would bring the betrothal gifts, I climbed back over the wall and went home. That night I told my parents I wanted to marry Rongxi. Father stroked his beard and nodded repeatedly. Mother was even happier and patted my hand. "At last you have come to your senses. Young Master Rong has pursued you for years. The poor boy has suffered enough." I froze. When did he ever pursue me? Mother tapped my forehead. "Taking you to pick lotus seeds and gather honey. You casually said you wanted to fly a kite, so he immediately went to buy one. When he heard you intended to study at Xiangshan Academy, he was afraid your identity would be exposed, so he hurried after you to protect you." The childhood memories I had always labeled as bullying took on an entirely different shape when viewed from another angle. "Was it really like that?" Mother sighed. "You always treated him as a younger brother. Behind your back, I do not know how many times he cried. Madame Rong has told me about it more than once." A sour ache spread through my heart, and I lowered my eyes. That idiot. Did he not have a mouth? Could he not simply have said something? 2 days later, I went to see elder sister. She was sitting by the window embroidering a handkerchief. After chatting with me for a while, she gave a soft sigh, worry clouding her eyes. I asked what had happened. Elder sister set down her embroidery frame and hesitated before speaking. "Yesterday I went to the Marquis Manor. Madame Su was feeling unwell, so a physician came to take her pulse. She asked him to examine me as well. I do not know why, but after hearing that nothing was wrong with my health, she suddenly blurted out a question. Why was I not pregnant yet? After the palace banquet, elder sister had taken a contraceptive decoction. Of course, she could not have become pregnant. She was still unmarried. An obvious pregnancy before the wedding would have exposed her to gossip. At the time, Madame Su's expression darkened immediately. Elder sister continued. Even young Lord Su seemed disappointed. Elder sister had taken the decoction in this life, but in the previous life she had not, and she truly had become pregnant. I remembered very clearly that she gave birth to a son less than 7 months after marrying into the Duke's household. Everyone said the baby had come early, and no one suspected anything. But in this life, on the very day Su Wenyu came to propose, elder sister had honestly told Mother what happened at the palace banquet. Mother must have feared that an unmarried pregnancy would invite gossip, so she had given elder sister the contraceptive decoction. I asked directly. Elder sister nodded. Mother said the wedding is still 2 months away. If I want children, I can have them after the marriage. Then the timing of the birth will make sense and no one will question it. She looked at me, confusion filling her eyes. Susu, did I do something wrong? You did nothing wrong. I thought for a moment, then asked the question I had kept buried for a long time. Elder sister, I only want to ask you one thing. Do you truly like young Lord Su? Or do you simply feel that, because of what happened that night, you ought to be with him? If it is only the second reason, you do not have to trade your entire life for this marriage. I continued carefully. The Marquis household is powerful, but Madame Su has many rules and a calculating mind. Your temperament is gentle. If you marry into that household, your days may not be easy. I do not want to watch you suffer. Elder sister blushed. Of course I like him. I am timid and not as free or lively as you. Knowing that he can return my feelings makes me very happy too. Seeing her shy expression, the words I had been about to say caught in my throat. Elder sister, I heard the drug young Lord Su took was extremely strong. It may have damaged his health. Her expression changed instantly. Really? I nodded. If he can never have children in this life, what then? Her shoulders sagged. She sat silent for a long time. Then she slowly straightened, her eyes growing firm. I like young Lord Su. I do not care about that. Elder sister truly loved Su Wenyu with all her heart. In my previous life, she had even hidden from me the fact that she later became Su Wenyu's kept woman. Only before he died did I learn of it. Holding my hand with his last strength, Su Wenyu asked me not to blame Alan. He said she truly had nowhere else to go, so she had turned to him for refuge. But how could she have had nowhere to go? Our parents had never said she could not return home. The gates of the Chen household would always have opened for her. She clearly had a home to return to, yet she had chosen to live as though she had nowhere to go. Every time I thought of it, my chest tightened painfully. Su Wenyu's attitude toward elder sister had cooled noticeably. I heard his health problem persisted. He sought physicians and remedies everywhere, but nothing improved. Elder sister was heartbroken. She personally prepared nourishing soup and took it to the Marquis Manor, concern written all over her face. Su Wenyu took the soup jar, did not even look at it, and smashed it to the ground. She came home with red eyes and cried until they were swollen. Young Lord Su said I was mocking him, but I was only worried about his health. She wiped her tears. I told him that even if his condition never improves, I would still like him, as long as he cares for me too. My temple began to throb. Father and mother had always treated elder sister and me equally. Food, clothing, spending money, education. There had never been any favoritism. Yet for some reason, elder sister had gradually become so melancholy and sensitive. Perhaps she took after concubine Fu, her biological mother. Concubine Fu died of illness when elder sister was 3. Afterward, mother took her in, raised her as her own, and even had her recorded in the family genealogy as a legitimate daughter. Yet no one had ever managed to change that sensitive temperament. In truth, elder sister had not been like this when we were small. Back then, she had bravely stood in front of me more than once. When mother punished me by striking my palms, elder sister threw herself over my hands. When a stray dog chased me at the corner of a street, she picked up a branch and stood between us. She had once possessed courage. I simply did not know when the years had begun grinding it away, little by little. I looked at her seriously. Elder sister, if he truly cared for you, he should treasure your concern, not lash out at you. His health problem is his own. Why should he refuse to face it and then turn around and blame you? Elder sister blinked at me in confusion. That is true. I already forgave him for it. I leaned closer, guiding her one step at a time. In my opinion, you should break off the engagement. She jerked her head up in alarm. You have to make him anxious for once. Only then will he understand how good you have been to him. His health is already like this. Who else would be willing to marry him? Elder sister bit her lip. Tears still hung from her lashes as she asked hesitantly. Really? Really, I said with absolute certainty. Just try it. Elder sister truly went to mother and asked to cancel the marriage. Mother stared at her in surprise. Have you thought this through? Elder sister gritted her teeth. I have. The next day, mother sent a matchmaker to the Marquis Manor to return the betrothal papers. The Marquis household did not argue much. I only heard that Su Wenyu locked himself inside his study that day and did not come out once. Elder sister, however, remained anxious. That night, she tossed and turned until she finally came to my room. Susu, what if he really does not come back? I smiled. Do not worry, he will. People are often like this. They do not value what is already in their hands. Only after they lose it do they finally panic. I knew Su Wenyu. He was accustomed to appearing upright and dignified, always holding himself rigidly to protect his pride. The higher a person stood, the more painful the fall. And now, with his health problem, who besides elder sister would be willing to marry him? While elder sister's marriage was left unsettled, the Wrong family's matchmaker arrived at our door amid the clamor of gongs and drums. The formal engagement rites proceeded splendidly. Before long, the entire capital knew that the second young lady of the Chen family was going to marry into the Wrong household. Now that our engagement was public, Wrong Si could visit me openly. One day he brought a box of osmanthus cakes. The next, a bag of sugar-roasted chestnuts. The day after that, he arrived with a steaming basket of crab roe soup dumplings, then sat in my courtyard with one leg crossed over the other and watched me eat. Remembering what mother had told me, I set down my chopsticks and asked, "Did you really follow me to Xiangshan Academy because you were afraid my identity would be exposed?" Rong Si was peeling a chestnut. His hand stopped, and both cheeks turned red. Was I not obvious enough? I fell silent. I had always thought he followed me there to bully me. I cleared my throat and changed the subject. By the way, do you have any handsome friends? His hands froze again. His eyes became as alert as though an enemy army had appeared. What are you planning? I am not even dead yet and you are already thinking about another man. I glared at him. What nonsense are you imagining? I want to find someone for elder sister. Elder sister has seen very little of the world. She spends most of her time in the inner quarters and rarely goes out. I want her to broaden her horizons." Only then did he relax, patted his chest, and said, "Leave it to me." For the next half-month, elder sister went out every day, and every day she somehow happened to meet a different handsome young gentleman. Once, as she passed a street corner, her foot slipped. Before she could cry out, a long-fingered hand steadied her arm. She looked up and met a pair of charming eyes filled with a smile. At a banquet the next day, someone reached through an opening beside a flower wall and offered her a blooming rose. The young man only smiled and said, "My lady is lovelier than the flower," before turning and disappearing into the crowd, leaving elder sister holding the rose in a daze. 2 days later, she entered a tea house and accidentally bumped into a young gentleman with a boyish face. He apologized in a panic, repeatedly taking the blame, then eagerly invited her upstairs and personally poured tea to make amends. Best of all was the day a sudden downpour struck. Elder sister was standing beneath an eave, waiting out the rain when a green bamboo umbrella unexpectedly appeared over her head. The man beneath it deliberately turned just enough to reveal an exceptionally handsome profile. "My lady, the road is slippery in the rain. Would you permit me to escort you home?" Every day elder sister returned with a faint blush on her cheeks. She secretly took my hand and said happily, "Susu, I never knew there were so many young gentlemen outside who were both handsome and gentle. Young Lord Su always told me that every man except him only wanted to deceive me. He said I must not trust anyone but him." Then she added with new understanding, "Now it seems young Lord Su is rather ordinary after all." I knew my goal had been achieved. I squeezed her hand and deliberately fanned the flames. "Exactly. He cannot have children. Yet he also forbids you to speak with other gentlemen, and demands that you trust only him." Seeing the slight wavering in her eyes, I spoke slowly and clearly. "Elder sister, are you really willing to become a vine that can survive only by clinging to him? A puppet he can order around east when he says east, west when he says west?" I continued. "Think about it. His health problem is obvious now. But after you marry, Madame Su could easily turn around and claim that you are the one who cannot bear children. At that point, no matter how much you protested, you would never be able to clear your name. You would be blamed for nothing while people gossiped about you and condemned you behind your back." Elder sister shuddered. She covered her ears and her eyes turned red. "That is terrifying. I would rather never marry in my entire life than live like that." She sat silent for a long time. Gradually, her gaze became firm. "Susu, I want to study at an academy in Chenan. I heard a new school for women has opened there. I want to see it for myself." When mother heard, she was overjoyed. She repeatedly said it was a good idea and immediately began preparing elder sister's luggage. Meanwhile, Su Wenyu waited and waited, but elder sister never came to apologize. At last he could no longer endure it. At the palace banquet that day, I was hiding in the covered passage, behind a side hall, taking a lazy break. I had just bitten into an osmanthus cake when someone blocked me at the turn. Su Wenyu stood in front of me with a dark expression. The first thing he asked was, "Susu, what has your elder sister been busy with lately?" I slowly swallowed my cake. "I do not know." I had no desire to say more to him. I shifted sideways to leave, but he stepped across and blocked my path again. "I heard she has been meeting quite a few men outside recently. She has become so unrestrained. She is nothing like she used to be." Elder sister has always observed proper manners when speaking with others. She has never crossed a line. Young Lord Su should be careful with his words and stop smearing her reputation. Su Wenyu gave a cold laugh. "Proper manners? If she truly cared about propriety, she would not attend all those poetry gatherings. If she continues like this, she will never be fit to become the wife of the marquis heir." I stared at him. "Su Wenyu, is the position of your wife really so precious?" He froze. "What? When we studied at the academy, your scholarship was not as good as mine. Every time you wrote an essay, you needed me to revise and polish it. Yet once you went home, you began claiming that an uneducated woman was more virtuous." I had deliberately hidden my abilities in those days and let myself appear one step below him in everything. I had believed him to be a modest gentleman. Now even His Majesty is expanding education for women. Elder sister attended a poetry gathering. What does that have to do with you? Besides, the engagement is already cancelled. I hope you will leave her alone. Su Wenyu's expression darkened, then went pale. I had just turned away when he called sharply behind me. "Chen Susu, did you say something to Alan?" I clenched my teeth. "Should you not be asking what you did to her? You forbid elder sister from speaking to any man. You make her copy lessons for women every day. You force her to learn in advance how to serve her future parents-in-law. You even..." My throat tightened, and I stopped. The previous month, when I visited elder sister's room, I had accidentally overheard her quietly instructing a maid to have a chastity belt made. The maid had blushed, accepted the order, and left. In my previous life, I had never been able to endure oppression quietly. Whoever made my life difficult would discover that I could make theirs even more difficult. When Madame Su tormented me and Su Wenju refused to help, I simply became contrary. If she ordered me to copy scriptures, I deliberately sat beside her bed in the middle of the night and copied them there, keeping her awake as she tossed and turned. Su Wenyu was trapped between us. He could not protect me, but he could not suppress his mother either. In the end, he could only pretend not to see. After he died, elder sister died soon afterward as well. At the time, I believed she had loved him so deeply that she could not bear a life without him. But now, looking back carefully, perhaps Sunyu had worn down her courage little by little, then worn down her sense of self until she forgot who she was, and truly believed she could not survive once he was gone. Sunyu lifted his chin arrogantly. If she intends to become my wife, of course she must follow the Su family's rules. Besides, her chastity has already been compromised. I am willing to marry her without holding the past against her. That is already an enormous blessing for her. I was so angry I laughed. If that blessing is so wonderful, why do you not keep it for yourself? My elder sister does not need that blessing. I waved him away. Su Wenyu, go bother someone else and stop throwing your status as a marquise heir around in front of me. His expression changed abruptly. His embarrassment turned to fury and he reached for my arm. I was already raising a hand to slap him when another hand swung in from the side at almost the same moment. Two sharp slaps sounded one after the other. I had no idea when Rongxi arrived beside me. In his other hand he was still holding a plate of warm crabapple pastries. A dark smile rested on his face. Young Lord Su, who gave you permission to put your hands on my future wife? He tilted the pastry plate slightly. If you have too much free time, why not spend a few days at the Court of Judicial Review? I have plenty of empty rooms. I guarantee you would be very comfortable there. Su Wenyu covered his burning cheek, his face turning livid with rage. He ground his teeth at us for a long moment, then gave an angry sweep of his sleeve and stormed off. Rongxi watched until he was far away. Only then did he turn back, shove the plate of pastries into my hands, and suddenly sound aggrieved. I arrived just in time to see him reaching for you. Even I have not had the chance to touch you yet. I gently hooked my finger around his little finger and shook it twice. Fine. You can touch me, you can touch me. His face turned red. He curled his fingers around mine and slowly tightened his grip. On the day elder sister left home, I accompanied her all the way to the city gate. Standing before the carriage, she suddenly turned and hugged me tightly. Mother had always thought elder sister was too soft-hearted. She often wanted her to change, but she was afraid of hurting her, so every time the words reached her lips, she swallowed them again. Elder sister released me and stepped back half a pace. The truth is, I have always envied you, Susu. I envied that you could study at the academy. I envied how you dared to love and hate openly, how freely you lived. I have thought about this for a long time. My feelings for Su Wenyu were never as deep as I once believed. A relieved smile appeared on her face. The man I liked was the Su Wenyu from your stories, the gentle, proper, courteous gentleman who seemed to have stepped out of a storybook. But that was only a shadow I painted for myself. I never truly saw the man he really was. Elder sister was just about to turn and board the carriage when rapid hoofbeats suddenly came from the distance. Su Wenyu swung down from his horse and strode forward to block the carriage. Alan, are you really leaving? Do you truly no longer care about the marriage between us? His voice sharpened. You must understand that I am the only man in this world willing to marry you. Your chastity was already compromised. Under the old rules, a woman in your position could have been drowned in a cage as punishment. I took responsibility for that matter on your behalf. What else are you dissatisfied with? Elder sister's face paled, but she stood straight. Young Lord Su, my life belongs to me. Even if I never marry, I will never marry you. Marriage is not the only thing a person can do in this world. Su Wenyu's expression became ugly. Alan, do you know what you are saying? I do. Elder sister curved her lips into a faint but calm smile. I have lived for 20 years, and only today have I truly understood what I want. I used to think far too highly of you. Now that I have seen you clearly with my own eyes, young Lord Su is nothing special after all. She looked him over with surprising seriousness. Your shoulders slope, your waist is thick, your legs are short, and your proportions are not even balanced. Oh, and there is your health problem as well. If we truly must decide who is unworthy of whom, that person is you. Su Wenyu almost toppled backward from fury. He clutched his chest and stammered without producing a complete sentence. Elder sister did not spare him another glance. She took her maid's hand and climbed into the carriage. I watched until her carriage disappeared at the edge of the horizon. Only then did I turn to leave. The moment I did, Su Wenyu stepped sideways and blocked me again. Chen Susu, if you had not interfered between us, Alan would never have left me. Without ceremony, I kicked him hard in the lower body, making him double over. Even a good dog knows not to block the road. Su Wenyu groaned, bent over in pain, his face drained white. Su Wenyu, elder sister was right. You are nothing special after all. I did not know how news of Su Wenyu's search for physicians spread. But before long, the entire capital was quietly discussing the Jingnan Marcus heir's embarrassing illness. Madame Su was so anxious that blisters appeared at the corners of her mouth. Spent the whole night reviewing several possible brides, wishing she could shove a bride straight into his wedding chamber and silence the gossip at once. But Su Wenyu refused every candidate. The night before my own wedding, the moon was already high. I was curled up by the window reading when a rustling sound came from the courtyard wall. Before I could stand and investigate, a figure reeking of alcohol climbed unsteadily over the wall and fell into my courtyard. Su Wenyu's clothes were disordered and his hair ornament sat crooked. He was so drunk he could barely stand, yet he leaned against a tree and staggered toward me. The maid beside me nearly screamed, but he quickly covered her mouth and said hoarsely, "Do not shout." He stumbled to within half a step of me. His eyes were red from drink, and his smile was both bitter and miserable. "Susu, only tonight did I understand something. I think I like you more." He laughed unsteadily. I liked Alan because she was gentle and easy to control, but somehow she became so unfamiliar that I can no longer understand her. He looked at me instead. "But you are different. At the academy, you listened to me. You gave way to me in everything. Can we start over?" Nonsense. What did he like about me? What he valued was that in my previous life, although I had never been easy to control, I had still protected the last scraps of his dignity and never exposed his impotence to anyone. Now elder sister refused to accept that burden, so he turned back to me, hoping I would cover his embarrassment again. Why trust a stranger when he could use someone he already knew? The maid beside me stared with round eyes. I turned, picked up the sturdy wooden bar used to brace the door, tested its weight and found it suitable. Then I swung once. There was a dull thud. Su Wenyu's eyes rolled upward and he collapsed unconscious. I tossed the bar to the maid and clapped my hands. He was babbling nothing but nonsense. "Take him outside. Do not let him dirty my courtyard." The maid nodded and dragged him away. A short while later, about the time it takes to finish a cup of tea, she returned triumphantly and presented me with a 100-tael banknote. I stared. "Where did that come from?" "Did you not tell me to take him outside, miss?" I thought anywhere outside counted, so I took him to Chunfeng Pavilion. There madam gave me 100 taels. I fell silent for a very long time before finally squeezing out one sentence. "You are a rare talent. Keep it yourself." The next day, two sensational stories exploded across the capital. The first was the Chen family marrying off its second young lady. Young Master Rong scattered celebration money everywhere, and commoners across the city rushed to pick up the lucky coins. From one end of the streets to the other, everyone praised the Rong family's generosity and said the Chen family was blessed. The second story was far less dignified. Rumor claimed that Su Wenyu, heir to the Jingnan Marquis household, had become involved in an overnight scandal at Chunfeng Pavilion, with 3 male courtesans. When he was carried back to the manor, his throat was so hoarse that he could no longer speak. Whether the experience had somehow changed his tastes or not, no one knew. In any case, within a few days another rumor spread. Su Wenyu had secretly purchased a residence outside the city, and kept all 3 men there. The arrangement did not remain peaceful for long. The 3 began quarreling bitterly over his attention. One day, the dispute turned violent. In the chaos, Su Wenyu suffered a devastating lower body injury. The rumor went even further, claiming that the 3 men followed it with a shocking act of desecration. When I heard the news, I nearly spat out my tea. I stared in shock for a long time, unable to close my mouth. The injury itself was already absurd enough. What stunned me even more was the grotesque rumor about what happened afterward. I simply could not understand why anyone would take things that far. By the time the physician arrived, Su Wenyu had already lost too much blood and could not be saved. 2 years later, elder sister sent me a letter. Even her handwriting had completely changed. The strokes were confident, open and free. "Susu, spring in Chenan is beautiful. The scenery is lovely and so are the people. Everyone seems exceptionally good looking. Simply seeing them puts me in a good mood. I have become a teacher now. Every day I teach several young girls to read and write. They ask me why their teacher always likes to smile. I tell them that once, their teacher did not know what a smile tasted like. Now that I finally know, I cannot seem to stop. At the end of the letter, she had added one final line in smaller characters. Susu, I finally understand. Heaven and earth are vast. The world was never limited to that one little courtyard.